parking space. That's all it was supposed to be. A simple spot on a crowded Naples street. But when Elena Russo refused to back down from the dark-eyed stranger blocking her way, she had no idea she was about to challenge the most dangerous man in the city. Lorenzo De Luca doesn't hear the word no. He doesn't lose. And he certainly doesn't let anyone walk away from him. What started as a battle of wills over asphalt and pride became something far more dangerous. A collision of two worlds that should never have touched. This is the story of how a 5-minute argument changed everything. Like this video, comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. And stay until the end to find out what happens when you tell a mafia boss he can't have what he wants. The screech of tires against cobblestone echoed through the narrow street, bouncing off centuries-old buildings that leaned into each other like gossiping neighbors. Elena Russo's hands gripped the steering wheel of her battered Fiat, knuckles white, jaw set. The parking space, her parking space, the one she'd been circling this godforsaken neighborhood for 20 minutes to find, sat there, empty and beautiful, just 3 car lengths ahead. She pressed the accelerator. That's when the black Mercedes appeared from the opposite direction, sliding into view like a shark cutting through water, sleek, expensive, utterly out of place in this working-class corner of Naples where laundry hung between buildings and street vendors shouted prices for bruised fruit. Elena's foot moved to the brake, but something stubborn flared in her chest. No, absolutely not. She'd been here first. She could see the space from her position. The Mercedes was still a good 6 meters away. She gunned it. So did he. For 3 breathless seconds, both cars rushed toward the same spot, engines growling. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. This was insane. This was stupid. This was... The Mercedes stopped. Elena exhaled and swung her Fiat into the space, the right side of her car barely clearing the bumper of a rusted Vespa. Her hands were shaking as she shifted into park. Through her rear-view mirror, she could see the Mercedes idling in the middle of the street, blocking traffic. Already horns were blaring behind it. She grabbed her portfolio bag from the passenger seat, checked her reflection, her dark hair was a mess, her lipstick slightly smudged, and pushed open the door. That's when she saw him. The driver's door of the Mercedes opened and a man stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Elena's rent for 6 months. His face was all sharp angles and controlled fury, dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her stomach drop. He started walking toward her. Elena's instinct screamed at her to get back in the car, lock the doors, and drive away. But she'd already parked, and more importantly, she was late for the meeting that could save her failing design business. She didn't have time for some entitled asshole who thought the world owed him whatever he wanted. She slammed her door and stood her ground. That's my spot. His voice was low, quiet, but it carried across the space between them like a threat. No, Elena said, surprised by how steady her own voice sounded. It's mine. I was here first. He stopped about a meter away. Up close, he was even more intimidating, not just because of his size or the expensive cut of his clothes, but because of the way he looked at her, like he was cataloging every detail. Like he'd never encountered something quite like her before and wasn't sure whether to be amused or annoyed. You should move your car, he said. You should find another spot. Something flickered across his face, like surprise maybe, or the beginning of anger. Do you know who I am? Elena hitched her bag higher on her shoulder. Someone who thinks a nice car means he owns the street. Look, I don't have time for this. I was here first. I'm parked legally. And I'm late for a meeting. She started to walk past him. His hand shot out, not grabbing her, but blocking her path. Wait. Elena stopped, tilted her head back to meet his eyes. They were the color of espresso, dark and intense, with something dangerous lurking beneath the surface. This close, she could smell his cologne, something expensive and woody that probably came in a bottle shaped like a sculpture. Please move, she said quietly. Your car is parked crooked. You're over the line. Elena glanced back. He wasn't wrong. Her right rear tire was maybe 5 centimeters over the faded white line. She looked back at him. So? So it's not properly parked. It's parked enough. His jaw tightened. Are you always this difficult? Are you always this entitled? For a long moment they stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills. Around them, Naples continued its chaotic symphony, vendors shouting, scooters buzzing past, someone's grandmother yelling from a fourth-floor window. But in the small bubble of space between Elena and this stranger, everything felt crystallized, sharp. Then, impossibly, his mouth curved into something that might have been a smile if it had reached his eyes. "What's your name?" he asked. "None of your business. I could have you towed." "For parking legally? Good luck." He studied her for another moment, then stepped back. "You're going to be late for your meeting." Elena blinked. That wasn't what she'd expected him to say. Yes, I am." "Then go." She didn't wait for him to change his mind. Elena brushed past him, her shoulder nearly touching his chest, and hurried down the sidewalk toward the building where her meeting was scheduled. She could feel his eyes on her back the entire way. It took every ounce of willpower not to turn around. When she finally reached the corner and glanced back, the Mercedes was gone. The parking space next to hers sat empty. Elena released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding and pulled open the door to the building. The meeting was a disaster. Signora Martinelli, the wealthy client who had promised to commission Elena for her daughter's wedding line, sat across the desk with her lips pursed in disappointment. Behind her, 3 fabric samples that Elena had spent weeks sourcing lay ignored. "I was expecting something more established," Martinelli said, her eyes scanning the portfolio with thinly veiled disdain. "These are beautiful designs, Signorina Russo, but I need someone with more experience. More connections." "I have connections," Elena lied. "And my work speaks for itself." "Your work is lovely for someone your age, but my daughter's wedding will be attended by some of the most influential families in southern Italy. I need a designer who understands that world." Translation: someone with a famous name and a workshop that didn't operate out of a one-bedroom apartment in Vomero. Elena gathered her samples, forcing her expression to remain neutral, even as frustration burned in her chest. "I understand. Thank you for your time." Outside, the afternoon sun had turned brutal. Elena walked back toward her car slowly, portfolio bag dragging at her shoulder. This was the 3rd major client she'd lost this month. At this rate, she'd be giving up her studio and looking for work at one of the big fashion houses, if any of them would even hire her. The thought made her throat tight. She'd moved to Naples 3 years ago with a head full of dreams and a portfolio from the Milan Design Institute. She'd imagined her own line, her own shows, her own identity in the fashion world. Instead, she was hemorrhaging money, losing clients, and seriously considering whether she needed to call her mother and admit defeat. When she rounded the corner back to her car, she stopped short. Someone was leaning against her Fiat. Him, the man from the Mercedes. He'd taken off his suit jacket, and his white shirt was rolled up to his elbows. In the harsh afternoon light, he looked slightly less intimidating and more like an actual person, though still unfairly attractive in a way that irritated her. Elena approached slowly. "Did you have my car towed and then come back to gloat?" He straightened, arms crossed over his chest. "Your car is still here." "So I see. What do you want?" "To apologize." Elena nearly dropped her bag. "What?" "I was rude earlier," he said, his voice still carrying that quiet authority, but with something softer underneath. "You were right. You got to the spot first. I shouldn't have challenged you on it." She stared at him. "Who are you?" "Lorenzo De Luca." He extended his hand. Elena looked at it like it might bite her. The name sounded vaguely familiar, though she couldn't place it. After a moment's hesitation, she shook his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and he held on just a second longer than necessary. "Elena Russo," she said, then immediately regretted giving him her real name. "I know." Her eyes narrowed. "How?" "Your business card fell out of your bag earlier. I picked it up." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the slightly bent card she'd had printed 6 months ago. "Elena Russo Designs" in elegant script across the top. She snatched it from his hand. "You could have just left it on my windshield." "I could have." He paused. "Your meeting didn't go well." It wasn't a question. Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Are you following me?" "No, but I'm observant." His eyes flicked to the building she'd just come from. Martinelli Imports, third floor, and you came back looking like you want to throw something. Maybe I want to throw something at you. That almost smile returned. Fair. Elena unlocked her car and tossed her bag into the passenger seat. Well, thanks for the apology, I guess. I have to go. Have dinner with me. She turned back so fast she nearly hit her head on the doorframe. What? Dinner. Tonight. Are you serious? I'm always serious. Elena laughed, a sharp sound with no humor in it. I just met you. You accosted me over a parking space and now you want to have dinner? No. Why not? Because I don't know you. Because this is insane. Because she gestured helplessly at him, at his expensive watch and his tailored clothes and the casual confidence that radiated from him like heat. Because you're obviously not someone I should be having dinner with. Lorenzo tilted his head slightly. You think you know what kind of person I am? I think I know enough. Then prove me wrong. One dinner. If I'm as terrible as you think, you never have to see me again. I don't want to see you again anyway. Liar? The word landed between them like a challenge. Elena's breath caught. Because he wasn't entirely wrong, there was something about him that pulled at her, something magnetic and dangerous and completely inadvisable. I don't date men I meet through traffic disputes, she said finally. This isn't a date. It's an apology dinner. I was an asshole about the parking space, and I'd like to make it up to you. You already apologized. Not properly. Elena crossed her arms, mirroring his earlier posture. Where? Wherever you want. I want you to leave me alone. Pick a place, Elena. Hearing her name in his voice did something strange to her pulse. She told herself it was irritation. Fine. You know Trattoria da Nannella? His eyebrow lifted slightly. The one in the Spanish Quarter? Yes. 8 o'clock tonight. If you're even 5 minutes late, I'm leaving. I won't be late. And this is just dinner, nothing else. Just dinner, he agreed, but there was something in his tone that suggested he didn't believe it any more than she did. Elena got into her car before she could change her mind or say something stupid. As she pulled away from the curb, she watched him in her rearview mirror. Lorenzo De Luca stood on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, watching her go with an expression she couldn't read. It wasn't until she was 3 blocks away that she realized her hands were shaking again. Elena's apartment was a study in controlled chaos. Fabric swatches covered every available surface. Her sewing machine sat permanently on the kitchen table, and 3 dress forms stood in the corner like silent witnesses to her perpetual state of almost making it. She dropped her bag by the door and went straight to her laptop. Lorenzo De Luca, she typed into the search bar. The results made her stomach drop. Photos. Dozens of them. Lorenzo at charity galas, Lorenzo at business openings, Lorenzo shaking hands with the mayor. And beneath the images, articles with headlines that made her mouth go dry. De Luca family expands shipping empire. Lorenzo De Luca, the young face of Naples' most powerful dynasty. Controversy surrounds De Luca development project. She clicked on the 3rd article. It was from 2 years ago, detailing accusations of corruption and connections to organized crime that had been leveled against the De Luca family. Accusations that had mysteriously disappeared after several key witnesses had recanted their testimony. Elena closed the laptop. Shit, she said aloud to her empty apartment. She'd agreed to have dinner with a man who was either a legitimate businessman from a powerful family or a criminal who was very good at looking legitimate. Either way, he was so far out of her league that it was almost funny. She should cancel, call him, except she didn't have his number. Show up and tell him she'd changed her mind, or simply not show up at all. Elena looked at the clock. 4:30, 3.5 hours until dinner. She went to her closet and started pulling out dresses. Trattoria da Nannella was packed, as it always was on Thursday evenings. The restaurant was a neighborhood institution, crammed into a narrow building where the tables sat practically on top of each other, and the menu was whatever Nannella's grandson decided to make that day. It was loud, chaotic, and completely unpretentious. Elena had chosen it deliberately. If Lorenzo De Luca was expecting some elegant establishment where he could impress her with his connections and his money, he was going to be disappointed. She arrived at 7:50 and grabbed a small table near the back, ordering a carafe of house wine while she waited. The red dress she'd chosen was simple but well cut, something she'd made herself last year. It made her feel armored. At exactly 8 o'clock, Lorenzo walked through the door. Several things happened at once. The noise level in the restaurant dropped noticeably. Heads turned. Nanella himself came out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron, his weathered face breaking into a smile. "Signor De Luca, we haven't seen you in months." Lorenzo shook the old man's hand warmly. "I've been busy, Franco. How's your daughter?" "Married, can you believe it? To that engineer from Salerno I told you about." "Good for her. Send them my congratulations." They talked for another minute before Franco gestured toward the back of the restaurant, toward Elena's table. Lorenzo's eyes found hers across the crowded room, and something in her chest tightened. He made his way through the narrow aisles, stopping twice to greet other diners who seemed to know him. When he finally reached her table, he'd rolled his sleeves up again and loosened his tie. "You're on time," Elena said. "I told you I would be." He sat down across from her, his knees bumping hers under the small table. "You chose this place to test me." "I chose it because the food is good and it's close to my apartment." Liar. There was that word again. Elena poured herself more wine. "Franco seems to know you. I've been coming here since I was 16. My father used to bring me." "I thought people like you ate at Michelin-starred restaurants." "People like me?" "Rich, important, connected." Lorenzo leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You looked me up." It wasn't a question, but Elena nodded anyway. "I wanted to know who I was having dinner with." "And what did you find?" "That you're either a very successful businessman or a criminal. Those aren't mutually exclusive categories." Elena's hand tightened around her wine glass. "That's not reassuring." "It wasn't meant to be reassuring. It was meant to be honest." He paused as Franco's grandson appeared with menus, though Lorenzo waved his away. "The usual, Marco, and whatever the lady wants." "I can order for myself," Elena said. Lorenzo's mouth quirked. "Then order." She did, choosing the pasta al forno and ignoring the way Marco looked between them with unconcealed curiosity. When they were alone again, she said, "Why did you really ask me to dinner?" "Because you interested me." "That's not an answer." "Yes, it is." He leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table. "Do you know how many people tell me no in a given year, including business, personal life, everything?" "I have no idea." "On average, 4, maybe 5, and 3 of those are my mother." "Sounds lonely." "It is." He said it without self-pity, just as a statement of fact. "You told me no 3 times in the span of 5 minutes. You didn't care who I was or what I could do for you. You just wanted your parking space and to get to your meeting. And that made you want to have dinner with me?" "Yes." Elena took a long sip of wine. "You have weird priorities." "Probably." Their food arrived, and for a few minutes they ate in relative silence. The pasta was perfect, as it always was at Nanella's, rich and comforting and exactly what Elena needed after the disaster of her day. "Your meeting," Lorenzo said eventually. "The one with Martinelli. She turned you down." Elena's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "How did you—" "I called her." The bottom dropped out of her stomach. "You what?" "After we met, I was curious about your work. So I called Lucia Martinelli and asked her about the designer she was meeting with this afternoon. She said you were talented but inexperienced, that you didn't have the right connections." Elena set down her fork carefully, trying to contain the fury that was building in her chest. "You had no right to do that." "Probably not." "Definitely not. You don't get to interfere in my life because you found me interesting for 5 minutes." "I disagree." "I don't care if you disagree. You can't just—" She stopped, aware that her voice was rising and people were starting to stare. She lowered it to a harsh whisper. "You can't just insert yourself into my business because you feel like it." "Why not?" "Because it's invasive and manipulative and completely inappropriate." Lorenzo set down his own fork. "Martinelli is wrong about you, by the way. I looked at your portfolio online. Your work is exceptional. Don't change the subject." "I'm not. I'm telling you that her rejection had nothing to do with your talent and everything to do with her limited imagination." "That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" Elena grabbed her purse. The point is that I don't need some powerful stranger making phone calls about me behind my back. I don't need someone who thinks his money and his name mean he can do whatever he wants. And I definitely don't need this dinner. She stood up. Lorenzo didn't move, but his eyes tracked her with that same intense focus from earlier. Sit down, Elena. No. Please sit down. Why should I? Because I'm about to offer you something, and you're going to want to hear it. Elena hesitated, purse clutched in her hand. Every instinct told her to walk out. But curiosity, dangerous, stupid curiosity, made her pause. What kind of offer? Sit down and I'll tell you. She sat, but she didn't put down her purse. Lorenzo pulled out his phone, typed something, and then turned it toward her. On the screen was a photo of a building, a beautiful old structure in what looked like the Chiaya district, with large windows and ornate balconies. I own this, he said. The ground floor is currently vacant. It used to be a gallery, but the previous tenant moved to Rome last year. It's been sitting empty since then. Elena looked at the photo, then at him. So? So I think it would make an excellent design studio. High ceilings, natural light, foot traffic from the shopping district. It's perfect for what you do. Her heart started beating faster. What are you saying? I'm saying I'll lease it to you, below market rate, a 1-year contract with an option to renew. Elena stared at him. Why would you do that? Because I can. Because your work deserves better than a 1-bedroom apartment in Vomero. And because I want to. You don't even know me. I know enough. This is insane. Yes. Elena looked at the photo again. The building was beautiful, exactly the kind of space she'd dreamed about when she first moved to Naples. But accepting it would mean being indebted to Lorenzo De Luca, and every article she'd read that afternoon had screamed warnings about what that might mean. What do you get out of this? She asked quietly. What do you mean? Men like you don't give things away for free. So what do you want from me? Lorenzo took his phone back, his expression unreadable. I want you to have dinner with me again, that's all. That's all? For now. The for now hung between them like a promise and a threat. Elena's hand tightened on her purse. I need to think about it. Take as long as you need. I mean it. This is too much. The offer stands either way, whether you have dinner with me again or not. Elena didn't believe him. Men like Lorenzo De Luca didn't give things without expecting something in return. But the rational part of her brain was already calculating square footage and imagining her dress forms in those big windows, and the desperate part of her was whispering that maybe this was her chance. I should go, she said. You haven't finished your pasta. I'm not hungry anymore. Lorenzo stood when she did, always the gentleman despite everything else. Can I drive you home? No. Walk you to your car? It's 3 blocks away. I'll be fine. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, heavy stock, embossed lettering. My number. In case you want to see the building, or talk, or tell me to go to hell. Elena took the card, their fingers brushing briefly. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. She left him standing by the table, aware of eyes following her as she made her way out of the restaurant. Outside, the evening air was cooler, carrying the smell of the sea and exhaust fumes and 1,000 dinners being cooked in apartments above the street. Elena walked toward her car, Lorenzo's business card burning in her hand like a live coal. She was in trouble. She knew it with absolute certainty. The question was whether she cared enough to walk away. 3 days passed. Elena didn't call. She didn't text. She tried very hard not to think about the building or Lorenzo's offer or the way he'd looked at her across that tiny table at Nanella's. She failed at all 3. On Friday morning, a delivery arrived at her apartment, a large package wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. Inside was a bolt of fabric, raw silk in a deep midnight blue, the kind of quality she couldn't normally afford. No note, no explanation, just the fabric and the faint smell of expensive cologne. Elena told herself she was going to send it back. She didn't. On Saturday, she was having coffee at her usual cafe when a woman approached her table. Mid-50s, elegant, with the kind of jewelry that whispered old money. Signorina Russo? I'm Bianca Ferrante, Lorenzo De Luca suggested I might find you here. Elena's coffee cup stopped halfway to her mouth. I'm sorry? I'm renovating my villa in Posillipo. I need someone to design custom window treatments, upholstery, and linens for 8 bedrooms. Lorenzo spoke very highly of your work. Do you have time to discuss a potential commission? Elena did not have time. She made time. By the end of the meeting, she had a contract that would pay her rent for the next 4 months and a client who actually seemed to respect her vision. On Sunday morning, she finally called the number on Lorenzo's card. He answered on the second ring. Elena, you need to stop. Stop what? Sending me things, sending me clients, interfering in my life. I thought you might appreciate the work. I do. That's not the point. Then what is? Elena walked to her window, looking out over the cramped buildings of her neighborhood. I want to see the building. A pause. Then, when? Today. Now. Before I change my mind. I'll pick you up in 20 minutes. No, just give me the address. I'll meet you there. Elena, address, Lorenzo, or I'm not coming. He gave it to her. 40 minutes later, Elena stood in front of the building from the photo, and it was even more beautiful in person. The late morning sun poured through those big windows, illuminating the empty space inside with golden light. Lorenzo was waiting by the door, keys in hand. He looked different in jeans and a simple black sweater, less intimidating, more human. But his eyes still had that intensity that made her feel simultaneously seen and hunted. This is it, he said, unlocking the door. Inside was perfect. High ceilings with original molding, polished wood floors, a small office area in the back. Elena walked through slowly, her mind already rearranging the space, seeing where her work tables would go, where she'd set up her sewing machines, where she'd hang her samples. The upstairs is storage, Lorenzo said, staying near the entrance. But it could be converted to a living space if you wanted. Elena turned to face him. Why are you doing this? I told you. No, the real reason. Lorenzo was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, softer, without the edge of command. My mother was a seamstress. Before she married my father, she worked in a little shop in Forcella. She made wedding dresses, baptism gowns, that sort of thing. She loved it. What happened? She married into my father's world, became a De Luca wife, put away her sewing machine and learned how to host dinners for dangerous men instead. Does she regret it? Every day. She'd never admit it, but I can see it. He walked further into the space, running his hand along the window frame. When I saw your work, it reminded me of hers. The attention to detail, the way you construct things. And when you told Martinelli's rejection story, I don't know, I wanted to do something. Elena's throat felt tight. That's not a good enough reason to give me a building. It's my reason. Lorenzo, I'm not asking you to marry me, Elena. I'm offering you a space to work, that's all. For now, he smiled slightly. You keep using that phrase. Because I don't trust it. Smart. They stood there in the empty studio, sunlight streaming between them, and Elena felt something shift. This was dangerous. Not just the building or the offer, but the man himself. Every logical part of her brain was screaming warnings. But the part that had spent 3 years fighting for every small victory, that had swallowed rejection after rejection, that had dreams slowly dying in a cramped apartment, that part was whispering yes. What's the rent? She asked quietly. Lorenzo named a figure that made her eyes widen. It was less than half what she was currently paying for her apartment. That's ridiculous. This space is worth 5 times that amount. Take it or leave it. You're going to lose money. I have money to lose. Elena walked over to the windows, pressing her palm against the glass. Outside, Naples sprawled in all its chaotic glory, beautiful and broken, and hers. This city had beaten her down for 3 years. Maybe it was time to let someone help her back up, even if that someone was complicated and dangerous and entirely too interested in her. 1 year, she said without turning around. 1 year contract, and then we renegotiate at market rate. 5 years, same rate. 2 years. 4. 3, and I pay for my own utilities. Done. Elena finally turned to face him. And I want it in writing that you don't get any say in my business. No interfering, no sending clients unless I ask, No showing up uninvited. That's going to be difficult. Too bad. Lorenzo crossed his arms, but he was almost smiling. Anything else? Yes. I need to know what you want from me. Not the building, not dinner. What do you actually want? He was quiet for so long that Elena thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. I want to know you. I want to understand what makes someone like you fight so hard for something as simple as a parking space. I want to watch you create things and argue with me and refuse to be impressed by money or power or any of the things that usually work. I want... He stopped, jaw tightening. I want something real. The honesty in his words hit her like a physical force. Elena's breath caught. I'm not sure I can give you that. I'm not asking you to, not yet. Just don't shut me out completely. She should say no. She should walk out of this perfect building with its perfect light and tell Lorenzo De Luca to find someone else to fix whatever was broken inside him. Instead, she heard herself say, I'll take the building, and I'll have dinner with you again. But slowly, Lorenzo. We do this slowly. Something in his expression shifted. Relief, maybe, or satisfaction, or something deeper that she didn't have a name for yet. Slowly, he agreed. And if at any point this becomes something I can't handle, I walk away. Deal. Elena took a deep breath. Okay, then I guess we have a deal. Lorenzo closed the distance between them in 3 strides and extended his hand. Partners. She took it. Partners. His hand was warm around hers, solid, and when he squeezed gently before releasing, Elena felt the foundation of her carefully controlled life begin to crack. She'd fought him over a parking space. Now she was letting him into her world. Elena had no idea which decision was more dangerous. The contract arrived by courier 2 days later, delivered to her apartment in a leather portfolio that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget. Elena spread the documents across her kitchen table, reading every clause twice while her coffee went cold. It was exactly what they'd agreed on. 3 years, fixed rent, no hidden clauses about creative control or oversight. At the bottom of the last page, Lorenzo's signature was already there. Bold, confident strokes that somehow looked exactly like him. Elena signed her name beneath his and told herself this was just business. The lie lasted until her phone rang that evening. Did you sign? Lorenzo asked without preamble. Yes, I'm sending it back tomorrow. Good. When can you move in? Elena looked around her cramped apartment, at the fabric samples covering every surface and the half-finished dress on her kitchen table. I need at least 2 weeks to pack everything. Hire movers. I'll send people on Saturday. They'll have you set up by Sunday night. Lorenzo, I can't afford professional movers right now. Good thing you're not paying for them. That's not part of our deal. Consider it a housewarming gift. Elena closed her eyes, pressing her fingers against her temple where a headache was starting to form. We talked about this. No interfering. I'm not interfering. I'm helping you move into a building I own. That's just good property management. That's bullshit, and you know it. He laughed, a low sound that did annoying things to her pulse. Have dinner with me Friday night. We'll discuss the logistics. We can discuss them right now. I'd rather do it in person. Of course you would. Is that a yes? Elena wanted to say no. She should say no. Instead, she heard herself say, Where? My place. I'll cook. That made her pause. You cook? You sound skeptical. I am skeptical. Rich men don't usually know their way around a kitchen. I'm full of surprises. 7 o'clock. I'll send a car. I can drive myself. Elena. What? Let me send a car. There was something in his voice, not quite pleading, but close enough to make her hesitate. Fine. But if your cooking is terrible, I'm ordering pizza. Deal. He gave her the address, and Elena wrote it down on the back of an envelope, trying to ignore the fact that she'd just agreed to go to Lorenzo De Luca's home, alone, for dinner that he was supposedly cooking himself. She was either very brave or very stupid, and she wasn't sure which option scared her more. Friday arrived faster than it should have. Elena changed outfits 4 times before settling on dark jeans and a silk blouse she'd made last spring, casual enough not to look like she was trying too hard, but nice enough that she wouldn't feel underdressed. She left her hair down, applied minimal makeup, and told herself this was just dinner between 2 business associates. The car that picked her up at 6:50 was not subtle. Black, sleek, with a driver who opened her door and called her Signorina Russo, like she was someone important. The drive took them out of the city center and up into the hills, where the houses got bigger and the walls got higher. Lorenzo's villa sat at the end of a private road, hidden behind iron gates and cypress trees. It was beautiful in an understated way. Old stone and terracotta, with terraces that overlooked the Bay of Naples. Nothing ostentatious, nothing screaming new money, just quiet, established wealth that had been there for generations. The driver let her out at the front entrance, where Lorenzo was waiting. He'd dressed down too, jeans and a white button-down with the sleeves rolled up. Barefoot. The casualness of it made him look younger, less intimidating, though his eyes still had that intensity that made her feel like she was being catalogued. "You came," he said. "I said I would." "You also said you'd think about the building, and that took you 3 days in a bolt of silk." Elena flushed. That was manipulative. That was effective. He stepped aside, gesturing her in. "Come. I promise not to poison you." The interior of the villa was surprisingly warm. Elena had expected something cold and modern, all marble and minimalism, but instead there were worn leather sofas and bookshelves that actually looked used. Art on the walls that seemed chosen for love rather than investment. A piano in the corner with sheet music spread across it. "This isn't what I expected," she admitted. Lorenzo led her through to the kitchen, a massive space with copper pots hanging from the ceiling and herbs growing in the window boxes. Something smelled incredible, rich and savory. "What did you expect?" "Something more threatening." "Threatening." "You know, all black leather and weapons mounted on the walls." He smiled as he checked something in the oven. "That's my other house." Elena froze. "That's not funny." "No. But the look on your face is." He straightened, pulling out a bottle of wine. "Relax, Elena. I'm just a man cooking dinner for a woman he finds interesting. Nothing sinister about it." She wanted to believe him. The problem was the stack of articles she'd read, the whispers about his family, the way people in restaurants went quiet when he entered. Lorenzo De Luca might look disarming in his own kitchen, but Elena knew better than to trust appearances. Still, she accepted the wine he poured and perched on one of the stools by the kitchen island. "What are you making?" "Ossobuco, my mother's recipe." "The seamstress." "The seamstress," he confirmed. "She used to make it every Sunday when I was a kid, before things got complicated." "What complicated them?" Lorenzo was quiet for a moment, stirring something on the stove. "My father's business, his expectations, the weight of being a De Luca." He glanced at her. "You really want to talk about this?" "I want to know who I'm doing business with." "We're past business, Elena. We both know it." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Elena took a sip of wine to buy herself time. "Then I want to know who I'm having dinner with." "Fair enough." He plated the food with surprising skill: tender meat, saffron risotto, vegetables that actually looked appetizing. "My father built an empire. Shipping, construction, real estate, most of it legitimate. Some of it..." He paused. "Less so." "And you?" "I'm trying to make it all legitimate. It's slower than I'd like, and not everyone in the family agrees with the approach. But I'm trying." "Why?" "Because I'm tired of looking over my shoulder. Tired of wondering which business associate is wearing a wire. Tired of my mother crying every time I leave the house because she's not sure I'll come back." The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. Elena set down her wine glass. "Is it working? The legitimizing?" "Slowly. We've divested from several problematic ventures in the last 2 years. Increased transparency in our accounting. Started working with law enforcement on anti-corruption initiatives." "That must make you popular with your competitors." Lorenzo's smile was sharp. "It makes me a target, but I'd rather be a target for doing the right thing than a criminal for doing the easy thing." They moved to the dining room, a smaller space with windows overlooking the terrace. The food was exceptional, rich and complex, and made with obvious care. Elena had to revise her assumptions about wealthy men and kitchens. "This is really good," she admitted. "You sound surprised." "I'm surprised. When do you have time to learn to cook like this?" "When you grow up in a house where trusting the staff completely is dangerous, you learn to do things yourself." He refilled her wine. Plus, my mother insisted, said no son of hers would be helpless in a kitchen. Elena found herself smiling despite everything. I like her already. She'd like you too. She has strong opinions about women who take shit from men. Smart woman. Terrifying woman. She once threw a plate at my father during an argument. It shattered against the wall 2 centimeters from his head. What did he do? Ducked, then apologized. Lorenzo's expression softened. He loved her, still does, even though he's gone. But he also dragged her into a life she never wanted, and I think part of him always felt guilty about that. Elena studied him across the table. In the candlelight, he looked different. Less like the intimidating man from the parking lot, and more like someone carrying weight he didn't know how to put down. Is that why you're helping me? Because you feel guilty about your mother? Partly. Also because I want to. That's not a good enough reason to upend someone's life. I'm not upending your life. I'm giving you space to build it. You're inserting yourself into my world without permission. You signed the contract. That's permission. Elena set down her fork. The contract is for the building, not for whatever this is. Lorenzo leaned back in his chair, watching her with that steady gaze that made her feel exposed. What do you think this is? I don't know. That's the problem. Does it need to be defined right now? Yes? No? Maybe. Elena rubbed her temples. I don't usually do this. Have dinner at strange men's houses. Accept buildings from people I barely know. I'm practical, cautious. But around you, I keep making decisions that don't make sense. Maybe they make more sense than you think. How? Lorenzo stood, walking to the window. Outside, the city lights of Naples spread below them like scattered diamonds. When I saw you fighting for that parking space, you know what I thought? That I was insane? That you were alive. Really alive. Not just going through motions or playing a role. You wanted something and you weren't going to back down just because someone bigger showed up. He turned to face her. I haven't felt that way in years. Everything in my life is calculated, strategic, every move planned 3 steps ahead. But you're unpredictable. You challenge me, you tell me no. That's not special. That's just self-preservation. For you, maybe. For me, it's revolutionary. Elena stood too, needing to move. She walked to the opposite window, creating distance. I can't be responsible for making you feel alive, Lorenzo. That's too much pressure. I'm not asking you to be responsible for anything. I'm just asking you to be yourself. And if myself decides this is too complicated and walks away, then I'll let you go. He said it quietly, but there was something final in his tone. I won't chase you. Won't show up uninvited. Won't send you clients or fabric or anything else. The building is yours regardless, contract stays intact, and I disappear from your life. Elena turned to look at him. You mean that? Yes. Why? Because you deserve the choice. My mother never got one. She fell in love with my father and got swept into his world before she understood what it meant. I won't do that to you. The vulnerability in his words made her chest tight. Elena crossed back to the table, finishing her wine in one long swallow. I need to think. Take all the time you need. I mean it, Lorenzo. I can't make this decision tonight. I'm not asking you to. She grabbed her purse from the chair. I should go. Let me drive you. Your driver can... I want to drive you, please. Elena hesitated, then nodded. They didn't talk as Lorenzo grabbed his keys and led her to the garage, where 5 cars sat in various states of expensive. He chose a simple sedan, not the Mercedes from their first meeting, and drove carefully down the winding hill roads. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it was charged with things unsaid. Elena watched the city approach through the windshield, trying to organize her thoughts into something coherent. Can I ask you something? She said finally. Anything. The legitimizing, the trying to go straight. Is it because you want to or because you're trying to be someone you're not? Lorenzo's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Both. Neither. I don't know anymore. He was quiet for a moment. My father taught me the family business. All of it. The legal parts and the illegal parts, the strategic relationships and the dangerous ones. He prepared me to take over his empire exactly as it was. But you don't want that. I want to sleep at night. I want to build things instead of threatening people. I want my future children to be proud of the DeLuca name instead of ashamed of it. He glanced at her. That probably sounds naive. It sounds human. They'd reached her neighborhood. Lorenzo pulled up in front of her building, killing the engine. Elena didn't immediately get out. The movers, she said, Saturday morning, 9 o'clock. They'll pack everything, transport it, set it up however you want. And if I decide I don't want to do this, whatever this is between us, the building is still yours. I told you that. Elena studied his profile in the dim light from the street lamps. You're either the most genuine person I've ever met or the best liar. Maybe I'm both. That's not reassuring. It's honest. She laughed, a short sound with no humor. I don't know what to do with you, Lorenzo DeLuca. You don't have to do anything with me. Just don't disappear completely. Elena reached for the door handle, then stopped. Your mother, the seamstress, does she still sew? The question seemed to surprise him. Sometimes. She has a room in her house set up with her old machines. Works on things for charity auctions, clothing for women's shelters, small projects. I'd like to meet her someday. Lorenzo's expression shifted into something Elena couldn't quite read. She'd like that too. Okay. Elena opened the door. Saturday, 9 o'clock. I'll be there. Lorenzo. What? Thank you for dinner, for being honest, for all of it. He smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. Anytime. Elena climbed out of the car and walked to her building without looking back. She could feel his eyes on her until she was inside, could hear the engine idle for another minute before finally driving away. In her apartment, surrounded by the chaos of her current life, Elena stood at the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, Lorenzo was driving back to his villa in the hills, carrying the weight of his family legacy and his own contradictions. And somehow, impossibly, she was letting him into her life. Saturday morning arrived with the punctuality of money. At exactly 9 o'clock, a truck pulled up outside Elena's building, followed by Lorenzo's sedan. 4 men in matching uniforms emerged, along with Lorenzo himself, wearing jeans and a work shirt that made him look like someone who actually moved furniture for a living. You don't have to be here, Elena said as he climbed the stairs to her apartment. I wanted to see where you've been working. It's embarrassing. It's yours. That's not embarrassing. He was right, of course, which was annoying. Elena unlocked her door and let him in, watching his face as he took in the organized chaos of her life. Fabric everywhere, sketches tacked to the walls, her sewing machines, 3 of them, various ages and states of repair, taking up half the living room. Lorenzo walked through slowly, examining everything with that focused attention he seemed to give everything. He stopped in front of her dress forms, where several partially completed pieces hung. These are beautiful, he said quietly. They're unfinished. They're still beautiful. He touched one of the sleeves carefully, fingers tracing the handwork. This stitching, it's all by hand? The detail work, yes. Machine stitching is faster, but for things like this, hand sewing gives you more control. My mother used to say the same thing. He looked at her. You're really talented, Elena. Don't sound so surprised. I'm not surprised, I'm impressed. There's a difference. The movers were efficient and professional, packing her life into boxes with practiced ease. Lorenzo helped despite her protests, carrying boxes down the stairs and making sure her machines were wrapped properly for transport. By noon, her apartment was empty except for the furniture that had come with the place. Elena stood in the middle of the bare room, feeling simultaneously relieved and unmoored. Ready? Lorenzo asked from the doorway. I don't know. That's honest. They drove to the new studio in separate cars, Elena following Lorenzo through the twisting streets of Naples. When they arrived, the movers were already unloading, and Elena spent the next 4 hours directing placement, organizing her workspace, making the space hers. Lorenzo stayed the entire time, not hovering, not directing, just there. He assembled her work tables, hung her sample boards, set up her machines exactly where she wanted them. When she couldn't reach the upper shelves, he appeared with a ladder. When she was trying to arrange her fabric storage, he offered quiet suggestions that actually made sense. It was domestic in a way that made Elena's chest tight. By 5 o'clock, the space was transformed. Her dress forms stood in the light from the big windows, her machines ready to work, her sketches displayed on the walls. It looked professional, real, like a legitimate business instead of a desperate dream. Pizza? Lorenzo asked as the movers finished. Elena looked at him. He had dust on his jeans and his hair was messed up from moving boxes, and he looked more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. Yeah, pizza sounds good. They sat on the floor of her new studio, eating pizza straight from the box and drinking cheap beer Lorenzo had bought from the corner store. Outside, Naples settled into evening, the light turning golden through her windows. Thank you, Elena said, for today, for all of this. You already thanked me. I'm thanking you again. Lorenzo took a sip of beer, looking around the space. This is how it should be. Your work deserves this. My work deserves what I earn for it, not what someone gives me. Why can't it be both? Elena was quiet for a moment, picking pepperoni off her pizza slice. Because accepting help feels like admitting I can't do it myself. That's pride talking. Maybe, but pride is what kept me going when I wanted to give up. There's a difference between healthy pride and refusing help when you need it. Says the man who probably never asked for help in his life. Lorenzo laughed. You think I built my father's empire alone? I have advisors, lawyers, accountants, strategists. I ask for help every single day. That's different. That's business. This is business too. You signed a contract. This feels personal. It is personal. He set down his beer. I'm not going to lie to you and pretend it's not, but that doesn't make it charity. You're paying rent. You're using the space to build your business. That's a legitimate transaction. With complications. With possibilities. Elena met his eyes across the pizza box. What do you want from me, Lorenzo? Really? I want to watch you create. I want to know what you're thinking when you argue with me. I want to have dinner with you and not feel like I'm performing. He stopped, jaw tightening. I want to feel like myself around someone. Does that make sense? Yes, Elena said quietly. It makes too much sense. They finished the pizza in silence, and when Lorenzo finally stood to leave, Elena walked him to the door. I'll see you soon, he said. Probably. Definitely. He smiled. You're not getting rid of me that easily. I'm starting to realize that. He left, and Elena stood in her new studio, surrounded by her dreams and her doubts and the lingering smell of his cologne. She was in deeper than she'd planned, falling faster than she'd thought possible. The scary part was she wasn't sure she wanted to stop. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of work. Elena threw herself into her commissions with renewed energy, the new space transforming not just her workflow, but her entire mindset. She took on 3 new clients, finished pieces she'd been struggling with for months, and started sketching designs that had been living in her head for years but never seemed possible before. Lorenzo stayed away. Not completely. He texted occasionally, asking how the studio was working out, if she needed anything, mundane things that somehow felt intimate. But he didn't show up uninvited, didn't send gifts, didn't push. Elena told herself she was relieved. She was lying. On Thursday evening, 2 weeks after moving into the studio, her phone rang. Are you free tomorrow night? Lorenzo asked. Why? There's an event, art gallery opening in Chiaia. I need to attend for business reasons, and I'd like you to come with me. Elena's hand tightened on her phone. As what? Your date? As my guest. No expectations, no obligations, just 2 people attending an event together. Lorenzo, there will be people there you should meet. Gallery owners, collectors, women who commission custom pieces for events. It's networking. Networking with you is never just networking. Probably not, but it's still valuable. Elena walked to her window, looking out at the street below. What's the dress code? Cocktail attire. Wear something you designed. Let people see your work. That's manipulative. That's strategic. There's a difference. You should say no. Every rational thought in her head was screaming no. Instead, she heard herself say, What time? I'll pick you up at 7. I can meet you there. Elena. Fine, 7. She hung up before he could say anything else that might change her mind. The next day, Elena closed the studio early and went through every piece in her collection. She finally settled on a dress she'd made 6 months ago, deep burgundy silk with careful pleating at the waist, and a neckline that was elegant without being too revealing. It was one of her best pieces, and she'd never had an occasion to wear it. Now seemed like the right time. Lorenzo arrived at exactly 7, wearing a dark suit that probably cost more than her car. His eyes widened slightly when she opened the door. "You made that," he said. "Yes." "It's stunning." Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Thank you." The gallery was packed with the kind of people Elena usually saw only in magazines. Beautiful, wealthy, dripping in jewelry and confidence. She felt immediately out of place, but Lorenzo's hand found the small of her back, steadying her. "Breathe," he murmured. "You belong here as much as anyone." "I really don't." "You're wearing a dress you created with your own hands that's better than anything half these women bought off a runway. You absolutely belong here." They moved through the crowd, Lorenzo introducing her to people whose names she immediately forgot. Gallery owners, art collectors, a woman who owned a boutique hotel and was looking for someone to design custom linens, a fashion blogger with 2 million followers who asked for Elena's card. It was overwhelming and exhilarating and terrifying all at once. "You're doing great," Lorenzo said during a quiet moment, handing her champagne. "I'm drowning." "You're swimming. There's a difference." A man approached, older, distinguished, with sharp eyes that lingered too long on Elena. "DeLuca, I didn't expect to see you here." "Marchetti." Lorenzo's voice cooled noticeably. "I could say the same." "Yes, well, business brings us to strange places." Marchetti's gaze shifted to Elena. "And who is this lovely creature?" Elena felt Lorenzo tense beside her. "Elena Russo, designer." "Russo? I don't know that name." "You will," Lorenzo said flatly. Marchetti smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, DeLuca always knows where to invest." He looked at Elena again. "Enjoy the evening, my dear. And be careful whose arm you take." He walked away, leaving tension in his wake. "Who was that?" Elena asked quietly. "Someone I used to do business with, before I started changing things." "He doesn't seem to like you." "The feeling is mutual." Lorenzo drained his champagne. "Come on, there's someone I actually want you to meet." He led her to a woman in her 60s, elegant in the way that comes from bone structure rather than money. She was studying one of the paintings with the focused attention of someone who actually understood art. "Mama," Lorenzo said. The woman turned and her face lit up. "Lorenzo, you actually came." "I said I would." He kissed her cheek, then gestured to Elena. "This is Elena Russo. Elena, my mother, Giuliana DeLuca." Giuliana's eyes sharpened with interest as she took Elena's hand. "The designer. Lorenzo told me about you." "He did?" "He won't stop talking about you, actually. It's becoming tiresome." But her smile was warm. "That dress. You made it?" "Yes, signora." "Don't signora me. I'm not that old. Call me Giuliana." She walked around Elena slowly, examining the construction. "The pleating. How did you achieve this structure without visible stitching?" Elena found herself explaining her technique, and Giuliana listened with the attention of someone who genuinely understood. They talked for 20 minutes about fabric tension and hand sewing methods, and the challenges of working with silk. When they finally paused, Giuliana was smiling. "Come to my house for tea next week. I want to show you some pieces I'm working on." "I'd like that." "Good. Tuesday afternoon. Lorenzo will give you the address." She kissed her son's cheek. "I like her. Don't mess this up." "I'm trying not to." "Try harder." She swept away, leaving Elena slightly stunned. "Your mother is a force of nature," Lorenzo finished. "I warned you." "You said she was terrifying." "Those aren't mutually exclusive." Elena laughed, genuine and surprised, and something in Lorenzo's expression shifted. He was looking at her the way he had that first day at Ninella's, like she was something unexpected and precious and dangerous. "Dance with me," he said. "There's no dance floor." "I don't care." He took her hand and led her to a quieter corner where the crowd had thinned. Someone had put music on, something slow and old-fashioned that didn't quite fit the modern art on the walls. Lorenzo pulled her close, one hand on her waist, the other holding hers. They moved together, and Elena felt her careful walls crumbling. This was dangerous, this moment, this man, this feeling spreading through her chest like warmth. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for bringing me, for introducing me to people, for your mother. Stop thanking me for things I want to do. I can't help it. Try." His hand tightened slightly on her waist, and Elena let herself lean into him. Just for this moment, she told herself, just for this dance. Tomorrow she could go back to being careful and practical and guarded. Tonight, she let herself feel. When the song ended, Lorenzo didn't immediately let her go. They stood there, barely swaying, close enough that Elena could feel his heartbeat. "I should take you home," he said. "Probably. But I don't want to." "Lorenzo, I know, too fast, too much, I know." He stepped back, creating space. "Come on, I'll drive you." The ride back to her apartment was quiet, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Elena felt something shifting between them, something inevitable and terrifying and real. When he pulled up outside her building, she didn't immediately get out. "Tea with your mother," she said. "Tuesday. I'll text you the details." "And then what?" Lorenzo looked at her, his dark eyes serious in the dim light. "Then whatever you want. I'm not going to push, Elena, but I'm not going anywhere either." Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. She got out of the car and walked to her building, feeling his eyes on her back the entire way. Inside her apartment, she leaned against the door and closed her eyes. She was falling for Lorenzo De Luca. It was the most reckless thing she'd ever done, and she wasn't sure she wanted to stop. Tuesday afternoon found Elena standing outside Juliana De Luca's house in Posillipo, clutching a small box of pastries and second-guessing every decision that had led her to this moment. The house was smaller than Lorenzo's villa, but somehow more imposing. A pale yellow building with green shutters, and a garden that looked like it had been tended by the same hands for decades. She rang the bell. Juliana answered within seconds, wearing an apron dusted with flour and a smile that was genuinely warm. "Elena, you came. I was worried Lorenzo might have scared you off by now." "He's tried," Elena admitted, handing over the pastries. "Good girl, come in, come in. I just put the kettle on." The interior was nothing like Lorenzo's villa. Where his was understated wealth, this was lived-in comfort. Photographs covered every surface. Lorenzo at various ages, other children Elena didn't recognize, family gatherings that looked both formal and chaotic. The furniture was worn but quality, the kind of pieces that got better with age. Juliana led her through to a sun-filled room at the back of the house, and Elena stopped short. It was a sewing room, but calling it that felt inadequate. 3 industrial machines sat along one wall, a cutting table dominated the center, and bolts of fabric were organized with the precision of someone who'd spent a lifetime at this craft. Half-finished projects hung from dress forms, and sketches covered a corkboard above the work table. "This is incredible," Elena breathed. "This is my sanity," Juliana said, pouring tea from a delicate pot. "Insolta." When Lorenzo's father was alive and the house was full of men making terrible decisions, I'd come here and make wedding dresses. Reminded me there was beauty somewhere. Elena ran her fingers along one of the machines, a vintage model she'd only seen in textbooks. "Lorenzo said you gave it up when you married." "I gave up the shop, the clients, the dream of making it my career, but I never gave up the work itself." Juliana handed her a cup. "Sit. Tell me how my son convinced you to take that studio." "It's a long story. I have all afternoon." So Elena told her the parking space, the confrontation, the strange courtship of dinner invitations and business propositions. Juliana listened without interrupting, her expression shifting between amusement and something sadder. "He's like his father in some ways," she said finally. "When Carlo wanted something, he didn't stop until he got it. But Lorenzo has more patience, more willingness to wait for the right moment." "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" "No. It's supposed to make you understand what you're dealing with." Juliana set down her tea. "My son is trying to be different from his father, better. But he's still a De Luca, and that comes with complications you can't even imagine yet." Elena's chest tightened. "Are you trying to warn me off?" I'm trying to prepare you. There's a difference. Juliana stood, walking to one of the dress forms. This is for a charity auction. Evening gown for a woman who survived domestic violence and wants to feel beautiful again. She gave me her measurements and told me to make her feel powerful. The dress was stunning, deep emerald silk with structure that suggested armor more than clothing. Elena could see the hours of handwork, the careful construction, the love poured into every stitch. It's beautiful. It's necessary. That's different than beautiful. Juliana looked at her. You understand that, don't you? The difference between making something pretty and making something that matters? Yes? Then you understand my son. He's trying to make something that matters out of a legacy that's mostly pretty lies and hidden ugliness. It's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be safe, and anyone who stands beside him is going to get hurt along the way. Elena set down her teacup carefully. Why are you telling me this? Because I like you. Because I see how Lorenzo looks at you. And it's the same way his father looked at me 40 years ago. Because I don't want you making my mistakes. What mistakes? Juliana was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the edge of the emerald dress. I thought love was enough. I thought if Carlo loved me and I loved him, we could build something good despite the ugliness around us. But love isn't enough when the world you're living in is rotten. It just means you both suffer together instead of separately. Lorenzo's trying to change that world. He's trying. That doesn't mean he'll succeed. Juliana turned to face her. I'm not saying don't care for him. I can see you already do. I'm saying go in with your eyes open. Know what you're choosing. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. I don't know what I'm choosing. That's the problem. Then figure it out before it's too late to walk away. Juliana's voice softened. Come, let me show you some techniques for working with silk. We can save the heavy conversation for another day. They spent the next 3 hours at the work table, Juliana teaching Elena methods she'd never seen before. How to create invisible structure in delicate fabric. How to hand stitch in ways that made the stitches part of the design rather than hidden. How to think about clothing as architecture for the body. It was the best afternoon Elena had spent in months. When she finally left, the sun was setting and her head was full of new ideas. Juliana walked her to the door, pressing a small package into her hands. Thread. Vintage silk thread I've been hoarding for 20 years. Use it well. I can't take this. You can and you will. I'm too old to use it all, and it deserves to be part of something beautiful. Elena hugged her impulsively, and Juliana held on tight for a moment before pulling back. Be careful with my son, she said quietly. He's stronger than he looks, but he's also more fragile. His father's death broke something in him, and he's still trying to figure out how to put it back together. I will. And be careful with yourself. You're stronger than you think, but that doesn't mean you're invincible. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. The drive back to her apartment was quiet, but her mind was racing. Juliana's warnings echoed in her head, mixing with her own doubts and the growing feeling she couldn't quite control. She was falling for Lorenzo, had probably already fallen, but that didn't mean it was smart or safe or sustainable. Her phone buzzed as she parked. A text from Lorenzo. How was tea with my mother? Elena stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. Enlightening. 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then reappeared. Did she tell you I'm dangerous and you should run? Something like that. Are you going to run? Elena's fingers hovered over the screen. This was her chance. She could end it now before things got more complicated, before she was in too deep to escape without damage. Not yet, she typed instead. The response came immediately. Thank you. 2 words that somehow carried more weight than anything else he'd said to her. Elena climbed the stairs to her apartment, Juliana's silk thread in her bag, and Lorenzo's gratitude in her chest, and wondered when exactly she'd stopped being careful. The next week brought a rhythm Elena hadn't expected. She worked during the day, pouring herself into commissions that were finally flowing steadily. Lorenzo texted occasionally, never intrusive, never demanding, just small glimpses into his day. A photo of his mother's garden, a question about fabric she'd mentioned, a restaurant recommendation. They didn't see each other, but his presence was constant in small ways that made Elena feel both connected and cautious. On Thursday, everything changed. Elena was working late in the studio, finishing a jacket for the boutique hotel owner she'd met at the gallery, when someone knocked on the door. She checked her phone. 9:30. The street outside should have been empty. She approached the door carefully. Who is it? Marco. I work for Signor De Luca. Elena opened the door to find a young man in his 20s, looking nervous and apologetic. Signorina Russo, I'm sorry to bother you so late, but Signor De Luca asked me to give you something. He held out a phone, expensive, sleek, not hers. I don't understand, Elena said. It's a secure line. He needs to speak with you, but not on regular phones. He said it's important. Elena took the phone with shaking hands. Is he okay? Please just call him. He's waiting. Marco left quickly, and Elena stared at the phone. A single number was programmed into it. She pressed call. Lorenzo answered immediately. Elena. His voice sounded wrong, strained, tense in a way she'd never heard before. What's going on? You sent someone to my studio at 9:30 at night with a phone. You're scaring me. I need you to listen very carefully. Don't interrupt, just listen. Elena's heart started hammering. Okay. There's a situation, business complications from my father's old dealings that are coming back to surface. Some people aren't happy about the changes I've been making, and they're making that clear in ways that could get dangerous. Lorenzo, you said you'd listen. I need you to be careful for the next few days. Don't go anywhere alone after dark. Don't open your door to anyone you don't know. Keep this phone on you at all times. You're really scaring me now. I know. I'm sorry, but I need you to take this seriously. Elena sat down on her work table, legs suddenly unsteady. Are you in danger? I'm fine. I have people watching me. But you're associated with me now. People have seen us together. That makes you a potential target for anyone who wants to send me a message. What kind of message? Lorenzo was quiet for a moment. The kind that involves hurting people I care about. The words landed like a punch. You care about me? Yes. I thought that was obvious. It's different hearing you say it like this, like it's a liability. It's not a liability, it's a fact. And it's one I need you to be aware of for your own safety. Elena pressed her hand to her forehead, trying to process. What happened? What specifically triggered this? Marchetti, the man from the gallery. He's been making moves against some of my shipping contracts. When that didn't work, he started making threats. My security team intercepted some communications that mentioned you by name. Her blood went cold. Me? Nothing specific, just implications that everyone I care about is vulnerable. It's standard intimidation tactics, but I'm not taking chances. This is insane. I got into a fight with you over a parking space, and now I'm on some criminal's target list? I know. I'm sorry. If I'd known it would put you in danger. What? You wouldn't have offered me the building? You wouldn't have taken me to the gallery? You wouldn't have introduced me to your mother? I don't know, Lorenzo said, and the honesty in his voice hurt. I wanted you in my life. I still want you in my life. But not like this. Not with you scared and looking over your shoulder. Elena stood, pacing her studio. What do I do? Keep the phone. I have a driver who'll be outside your building starting tomorrow. He'll take you wherever you need to go. Stay aware of your surroundings. And if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you call me immediately on this line. How long? I don't know, a few days, maybe a week, until we resolve the situation with Marchetti. Resolve how? You don't want to know. Yes, I do. I'm involved now, apparently. I deserve to know. Lorenzo exhaled slowly. Legal channels, paperwork, lawyers. I'm not my father, Elena. I'm not going to have someone killed over a business dispute. But you could. Yes, but I won't. Elena leaned against her work table, feeling the weight of what she'd stumbled into. Your mother warned me about the complications. My mother is usually right. She said being with you meant getting hurt. She's definitely right about that. Lorenzo paused. You can still walk away. I meant what I said. If this is too much, it is too much. This is absolutely insane and terrifying and not what I signed up for. I know, but I'm not walking away. Silence on the other end of the line. Then quietly. Why not? Elena closed her eyes. Because I care about you too. and because I'm apparently just as reckless as you are. Elena, don't. Don't make this more complicated than it already is. Just promise me you're being careful too. I promise. And promise me this ends. That eventually things calm down and I can stop carrying a burner phone and having a driver shadow me. I promise. One way or another, this ends. They stayed on the line for another moment, neither speaking, just breathing together across the distance. I should let you go, Lorenzo said finally. Get home. Lock your doors. The driver's name is Antonio. He'll be there in 10 minutes. Okay? Elena? Yeah? Thank you. For not running. Thank you for warning me instead of hiding it. She hung up and immediately started packing her things. Her hands were shaking, and she couldn't tell if it was fear or adrenaline or the delayed impact of Lorenzo's confession. He cared about her. Enough that threats against her scared him. Enough that he'd given her a secure phone and a driver and warnings she couldn't ignore. She was in deep, deeper than she'd realized, and the terrifying part was that she didn't want to surface. Antonio turned out to be in his 40s, professional and quiet, with the build of someone who'd done military service. He drove her home without conversation, checked her apartment before letting her enter, and gave her his number with instructions to call if she needed anything. Elena locked her doors, checked the windows, and sat on her couch with the burner phone in her lap. This was her life now. Drivers and security concerns and burner phones, because she'd fallen for a man trying to escape his father's legacy. Her regular phone buzzed. A text from her best friend, Chiara, asking if she wanted to get drinks this weekend. Elena looked at the message, then at the burner phone, then back at the message. How was she supposed to explain any of this? She texted back a non-committal response and tried to sleep. It took hours. The next 3 days were surreal. Elena went about her normal routine, studio, clients, work, but with Antonio shadowing her every move. He stayed outside when she met with clients, waited in the car when she ran errands, and generally made her feel both safer and more paranoid. Lorenzo texted updates on the burner phone, short messages, meetings today, should have resolution soon. And later, Marchetti's lawyers are talking. Good sign. Elena wanted to call him, to hear his voice, but something held her back. This felt too fragile, too dangerous to push. On Saturday afternoon, her regular phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Signorina Russo, this is Vittorio Marchetti. Elena's blood froze. How did you get this number? That's not important. What's important is that we talk. I have nothing to say to you. Then listen. Lorenzo De Luca is playing a dangerous game. He thinks he can remake his father's empire into something clean, something legitimate, but there are consequences for that kind of transformation. People get hurt, businesses fail, old agreements get broken. What does this have to do with me? You're his weakness now, the pretty designer he parades around to prove he's changed. But you're just another piece on the board, and if you're smart, you'll remove yourself before the board gets flipped. Elena's hand tightened on the phone. Is that a threat? It's advice. From someone who's seen this play out before. Carlo De Luca tried to go legitimate once. It didn't end well for anyone involved. I'm hanging up now. One more thing. Ask Lorenzo about the warehouse fire in Secondigliano. Ask him what really happened to the witnesses who were going to testify against his family. Ask him if he's really as different from his father as he claims. The line went dead. Elena stood frozen in her studio, phone still pressed to her ear, Marchetti's words echoing in her head. She should call Lorenzo immediately, tell him about the contact, but instead she found herself opening her laptop and typing Secondigliano Warehouse Fire De Luca into the search bar. The articles that came up made her stomach drop. 3 years ago, a warehouse owned by one of the De Luca subsidiary companies had burned down. 4 people died. There had been an investigation, witnesses who claimed it was arson, rumors of insurance fraud, and then the witnesses had recanted, the investigation had stalled, and the whole thing had disappeared from the news cycle. Lorenzo would have been in his mid-20s then, just taking over from his father. Elena's hands shook as she scrolled through article after article, each one painting a picture that contradicted everything Lorenzo had told her about legitimizing the family business. Her burner phone rang. She stared at it for 3 rings before answering. "Are you okay?" Lorenzo asked immediately. "Antonio said you looked upset." I'm fine. You're lying. What happened? Elena took a deep breath. Marchetti called me. Silence. Then, in a voice gone deadly quiet. When? 10 minutes ago. On my regular phone. What did he say? That I'm a weakness. That I should walk away before I get hurt. And he told me to ask you about a warehouse fire in Secondigliano. More silence. Elena waited, her heart pounding. I'm coming to you, Lorenzo said finally. Stay in the studio. Antonio's outside. Don't open the door for anyone else. Lorenzo? 20 minutes. We'll talk about this in person. He hung up. Elena set down both phones and walked to the window. Outside, Antonio's car idled at the curb, and the street looked normal. People walking, shops closing, Naples doing its chaotic evening routine. But nothing felt normal anymore. She'd known Lorenzo was complicated. She'd known his family history was dark. But hearing about potential murders, potential arson, witnesses who mysteriously changed their stories, that was different than vague warnings about criminal connections. That was real, specific, dangerous in ways she'd been able to ignore until now. Exactly 19 minutes later, Lorenzo's car pulled up. He got out, spoke briefly with Antonio, and headed toward the studio entrance. Elena buzzed him in. He looked different, older somehow, with shadows under his eyes and tension in his shoulders. He stopped just inside the door, hands in his pockets, like he wasn't sure he was allowed closer. Tell me what Marchetti said. Exactly. Elena recounted the conversation, watching Lorenzo's face grow harder with each word. When she finished, he was completely still. And then you looked it up, he said. Yes. What did you find? Articles, investigations, dead witnesses and convenient recantations. Lorenzo nodded slowly. What do you want to know? The truth. All of it. He walked to her work table, gripping the edge like it was the only thing holding him up. The warehouse fire was real. 4 people died, and it was arson. Someone was trying to destroy evidence of smuggling operations my father had been running through that facility. Insurance fraud was the cover story, but the real goal was eliminating proof. Who set the fire? I don't know, not for certain. I have suspicions, but no proof. And the witnesses? Lorenzo's jaw tightened. They were threatened. Their families were threatened. I didn't order it, but I didn't stop it either. I was new to running things, still figuring out how to separate myself from my father's methods. And I failed. I let fear win instead of fighting for what was right. People died, Lorenzo. I know. And you just, what? Swept it under the rug? Let whoever did it get away with murder? No. I've spent the last 3 years systematically removing every person who was involved in that operation from positions of power in my organization. Some I fired. Some I helped law enforcement build cases against. Some I paid to disappear and never come back. It's not justice, but it's what I could do without starting a war that would have killed more people. Elena stared at him. You should have told me. I know. Before I signed the contract, before I met your mother, before any of this. You're right. I should have. But I was selfish and I wanted you in my life, and I convinced myself that keeping you separate from that part of my history meant it wouldn't touch you. It's touching me now. Yes, it is. Elena walked to the window, needing distance. I don't know what to do with this. I don't expect you to do anything with it. This is my mess, my responsibility. You didn't ask for any of it, but I'm here anyway. You don't have to be. She turned to face him. Is that what you want? For me to leave? Lorenzo's expression cracked. No, but I want you safe more than I want you here. Those aren't mutually exclusive. In my world, they might be. Elena crossed her arms, trying to hold herself together. Your mother said being with you meant getting hurt. She didn't specify what kind of hurt. There are a lot of kinds. Physical, emotional. The slow erosion of believing the best in people. Take your pick. Is this you trying to push me away? This is me being honest. Finally, completely. He straightened, meeting her eyes. I'm trying to be better than my father. I'm trying to build something legitimate and clean, but I'm also carrying the weight of everything he did, everything I enabled in those first years, and I don't know if that weight ever goes away. Do you want it to? The question seemed to surprise him. What? Do you want the weight to go away? Or is carrying it part of your penance? Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. Then figure it out. Because I can't be with someone who's determined to suffer for past mistakes instead of actually fixing them. I am fixing them. By isolating yourself? By pushing away anyone who cares about you? That's not fixing anything. That's just slow-motion self-destruction. His hands clenched at his sides. What do you want from me, Elena? I want you to fight for this. Not just for your business or your family legacy. For us. For the possibility that maybe you can have something good despite the ugliness. I don't deserve something good. That's not your call to make. They stared at each other across the studio, and Elena felt everything crystallizing into this moment. Either Lorenzo would step forward, would choose to believe he could have something beyond guilt and legacy, or he'd retreat into the safety of self-imposed isolation. She held her breath. Lorenzo moved, not away but toward her, crossing the space in 3 long strides. His hands came up to frame her face, and his eyes were desperate and dark and completely focused on her. I don't know how to do this, he said roughly. I don't know how to be what you need while also keeping you safe from what I am. Then we figure it out together. Elena? She kissed him. It was a bad idea, possibly the worst idea she'd ever had, but she kissed him anyway, and Lorenzo responded like he'd been waiting for permission. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and the kiss was fierce and messy and real in a way that terrified her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lorenzo pressed his forehead to hers. I'm still dangerous, he whispered. I know. And this is still complicated. I know. And you're not running. Not yet, he laughed, short and sharp. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Probably both. Lorenzo pulled back just enough to look at her. Marchetti, the situation. I need to handle it. How? Properly, through lawyers and legitimate channels. It's going to take time, and it's not going to be clean, but I'm not going to give him ammunition by doing anything illegal. And in the meantime, you keep Antonio, keep the secure phone, stay careful. And us? His thumb brushed her cheekbone. What about us? What are we doing, Lorenzo? Really? I don't know, but I want to find out. Elena nodded, leaning into his touch. Okay, then we find out, together. No more secrets. No more secrets, he agreed. It was a promise they both knew might be impossible to keep. But in that moment, surrounded by fabric and dreams and the beginning of something that could destroy them both, they chose to believe it anyway. Lorenzo stayed for another hour. They talked, really talked, about his father's legacy, about the specific steps he was taking to legitimize the business, about the people who supported the change, and the ones who fought it. Elena asked hard questions, and Lorenzo answered them with an honesty that was sometimes painful. When he finally left, kissing her one more time at the door, Elena felt simultaneously more grounded and more terrified than she'd been in weeks. She was choosing this. Choosing him. Choosing to walk into danger with her eyes open because the alternative, walking away from something real, felt worse. It was reckless and risky and probably going to end badly. But for the first time in her life, Elena was choosing passion over prudence, and she wasn't sure if that made her brave or just a fool. The next morning, Elena woke to 17 missed calls and a message on the burner phone that made her heart stop. Marchetti arrested early this morning. Wire fraud, extortion, racketeering. You're safe. I'm coming over. She was still in her pajamas when Lorenzo arrived, looking like he hadn't slept. He had coffee and pastries from her favorite cafe, and the tension in his shoulders had eased slightly. It's over? Elena asked, letting him in. The immediate threat, yes. He'll be in custody for a while, and his organization is scrambling. They won't have time to worry about you. Elena took the coffee gratefully, sinking onto her couch. How did you make it happen so fast? I didn't. The evidence has been building for months. Federal prosecutors, financial crimes unit. I just made sure they had everything they needed and convinced them to move quickly. He sat beside her, close, but not touching. I told you. Legal channels. I wasn't sure I believed you. I know. I wouldn't have believed me either. They sat in silence for a moment, drinking coffee while morning light filtered through the windows. Elena felt exhaustion settling into her bones, the kind that came from sustained fear finally releasing. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you can go back to your life. No more Antonio shadowing you, no more burner phone, just work and normal problems." "And us?" Lorenzo set down his coffee, turning to face her fully. "That depends on you." "On me?" "You've seen the worst of my world now. The threats, the violence, the complications. You have all the information. So the question is whether you still want this." Elena looked at him, really looked. The shadows under his eyes, the tension he carried even in moments of supposed relief, the way his hands gripped his coffee cup like it might disappear. He was offering her an out, but she could see how much it cost him. "Do you want me to want this?" she asked. "More than anything. But I want you safe more than I want you here." "You keep saying that, like those are the only two options." "In my experience, they usually are." Elena set down her own coffee and shifted closer. "Then maybe we need to expand your experience." She kissed him, morning breath and coffee taste, and all the complicated feelings neither of them knew how to voice. Lorenzo responded immediately, his hand coming up to tangle in her hair, pulling her closer. When they finally broke apart, he was looking at her like she was something precious and impossible. "I don't deserve you," he said quietly. "Stop deciding what you deserve. That's not how this works." "Then how does it work?" "We figure it out as we go. We make mistakes, we fight. We try to be honest even when it's hard. And we don't run just because things get complicated." Lorenzo's thumb brushed her cheek. "Things are always going to be complicated with me." "I'm starting to realize that. But my life was boring before you showed up and fought me over a parking space. Maybe I need complicated." He smiled, and it was the first genuine, unguarded smile she'd seen from him. "You're insane." "Probably, but so are you for wanting this." "Fair point." They spent the rest of the morning on her couch, talking about everything and nothing. Lorenzo told her about the actual logistics of dismantling his father's empire, the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the legitimate businesses tangled up with illegal ones. Elena told him about her dreams for the studio, the collection she wanted to design, the fashion week she'd always wanted to attend but never thought she could afford. It was ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. Just two people learning each other without immediate danger pressing down on them. Around noon, Lorenzo's phone rang. He checked it, frowned, and answered. "Mama, yes, I'm fine. No, she's fine too. Actually, I'm with her right now." He pulled the phone slightly away from his ear, and Elena could hear Giuliana's voice rising in rapid Italian. Lorenzo winced. "Yes, I know I should have called you first. Yes, I know you were worried. Can I... Mama, please..." He held the phone out to Elena. "She wants to talk to you." Elena took it cautiously. "Hello?" "Elena, thank goodness. This stubborn boy of mine didn't tell me about the threats until after everything was resolved. Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Giuliana, really." "And he's been treating you well? Not being too controlling or secretive?" Elena glanced at Lorenzo, who was studying the ceiling like it held answers. "He's trying. We're both trying." "Good. Come to dinner tonight, both of you. I want to see with my own eyes that you're both in one piece." "I don't want to intrude." "You're not intruding. Your family now, 6 o'clock. Don't be late." She hung up before Elena could argue. Elena handed the phone back to Lorenzo. "Your mother just declared me family and summoned us to dinner." "That sounds like her. We don't have to go if you're not ready." "Are you kidding? I'm terrified of what she'll do if we don't show up." Lorenzo laughed. Also a valid concern. That evening, they drove to Giuliana's house together. Elena had changed into a simple dress she'd made last month, navy blue with careful pleating at the waist. Lorenzo wore jeans and a button-down, more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. Giuliana answered the door wearing an apron covered in flour and sauce stains, her face lighting up when she saw them. "Finally, come in, come in. Dinner's almost ready." The dining room table was set for 4, which made Elena pause. "Are we expecting someone else?" "My daughter," Giuliana said. "Lorenzo's sister. She wanted to meet you." Lorenzo's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "You didn't tell me Sofia was coming." "Because you would have made excuses. She's your sister, Lorenzo, and Elena should meet her." The front door opened, and a woman in her early 20s swept in, all energy and dark eyes that were startlingly similar to Lorenzo's. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was murder coming from the university." She stopped when she saw Elena, a smile spreading across her face. "You must be Elena, the woman who somehow convinced my brother he's allowed to be happy." "I'm Sophia." She pulled Elena into a hug before Elena could respond, and the warmth of it was disarming. "Careful," Lorenzo said. "Elena's still deciding if I'm worth the trouble." "Smart woman," Sophia said, releasing Elena. "He's definitely trouble, but he's trying to be less terrible, so that counts for something." Dinner was chaos in the best way. Juliana had made enough food for 10 people, and Sophia kept the conversation moving with stories from her architecture program and pointed questions about how Elena and Lorenzo had met. Elena found herself laughing more than she had in weeks, watching the easy affection between Lorenzo and his family. "So he actually fought you over a parking space?" Sophia asked, delighted. "That's the most ridiculous meet-cute I've ever heard." "It wasn't ridiculous," Lorenzo protested. "It was ridiculous," Elena finished. "He was completely unreasonable." "He's always unreasonable when he doesn't get his way immediately," Sophia said. "One time when we were kids, someone took a seat at a restaurant and he refused to eat until they moved." "I was 7. You were 15. Juliana laughed, pouring more wine. "He gets it from his father. Carlo was the same way, stubborn beyond reason." The mention of Lorenzo's father created a brief silence. Sophia's smile dimmed slightly, and Lorenzo's hand tightened around his wine glass. "Anyway," Sophia said, recovering quickly, "I'm glad someone finally challenges him. He needs someone who won't just agree with everything he says." "I haven't agreed with anything he's said since we met," Elena admitted. "Perfect. Keep doing that." After dinner, Juliana and Sophia disappeared into the kitchen to handle dishes despite Elena's offers to help. Lorenzo led her out to the terrace, where the lights of Naples spread below them. "Your sister is wonderful," Elena said. "She is. She's also the only person in the family who has no connection to the business. My father made sure of that. Kept her completely separate." "That was good of him?" "It was the one thing he did right." Lorenzo leaned against the railing. "Sophia doesn't know most of it. The illegal operations, the violence, the threats. She knows the family business has complications, but not the details. I want to keep it that way." "She's not a child, Lorenzo. She's in her 20s. "I know, but she has a chance at a normal life. I don't want to take that from her by dragging her into the ugliness." Elena moved to stand beside him. "Is that what you think you're doing to me? Dragging me into ugliness?" "Aren't I?" "No, you're letting me make my own choices. There's a difference." Lorenzo was quiet for a moment, then turned to face her. "I need to ask you something." "Okay?" "This thing between us. I need to know if it's real for you. Not just the excitement of danger or the novelty of my world. Actually real." Elena's breath caught. "Why are you asking?" "Because I'm falling in love with you, and I need to know if I'm doing it alone." The confession hung in the air between them, raw and vulnerable. Elena felt her heart hammering against her ribs. "You're not alone," she said quietly. "I'm falling too. Have been since that first dinner at Nanella's, probably. Maybe even since the parking space." Lorenzo's hand came up to cup her face. "That's insane. You keep using that word. Because it keeps being true." He kissed her, and it was different than the other times. Slower, deeper, weighted with the admission they'd both just made. Elena felt herself melting into it, into him, into the impossibility of this whole situation. When they finally broke apart, Lorenzo rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right. No more secrets, no more half-truths. Complete honesty, even when it's hard. I want that too. And I want you to meet more of my world. The legitimate parts. The people I work with, the businesses we're building. I want you to see what I'm trying to create, not just what I'm trying to escape." "Okay?" "Starting next week, there's a development project in Scampia, community center, affordable housing, job training programs. It's the first completely clean project we've done with zero connection to the old operations. I want you to see it." Elena pulled back slightly to look at him. "Why?" "Because it's the future I'm building, and I want you to be part of that future." The weight of what he was saying settled over her. This wasn't just about dating or falling in love. This was about choosing to be part of his transformation, his attempt to make something good out of a legacy of ugliness. "I'll come," she said. "But Lorenzo?" "Yeah?" "I need you to understand something. I'm not here to save you or fix you or be the symbol of your redemption. I'm here because I care about you, the actual you, not the better version you're trying to become." His eyes searched her face. "Even with all the damage?" "Especially with all the damage. Because you're not hiding from it or pretending it doesn't exist. You're actively trying to do better, and that matters more than being perfect." Lorenzo pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. Elena felt his heartbeat against her chest, steady and strong, and let herself believe that maybe this could work. Maybe love was enough if they were both willing to fight for it. "We should go back inside," Lorenzo said eventually, "before Sophia comes looking and makes inappropriate comments about what we're doing out here." "Is that likely?" "Extremely likely." They headed back inside to find Sophia and Juliana in the living room, pretending they hadn't been watching through the window. Sophia's grin was shameless. "So," she said, "are you two officially together now, or are we still pretending this is casual?" "Sophia," Juliana warned. "What? I'm just asking what everyone wants to know." Lorenzo sighed. "We're together." "Happy?" "Delighted." "Elena, welcome to the family. I hope you're prepared for Sunday dinners and my mother's tendency to interfere in everything." "I heard that," Juliana said. "You were meant to." Elena found herself laughing again, and when Lorenzo took her hand, lacing their fingers together, it felt right, natural, like something that had been inevitable from that first argument over a parking space. The following week, Lorenzo picked her up early on Tuesday morning for the trip to Scampia. Elena had heard stories about the neighborhood. Poverty, crime, the kind of urban decay that made news headlines. She wasn't sure what to expect. What she found was different than she'd imagined. Yes, there was poverty. Yes, the buildings showed years of neglect. But there was also life. Children playing, old women sitting in doorways, street vendors selling produce. And in the middle of it all, a construction site that was slowly becoming something new. Lorenzo introduced her to the project manager, a woman named Alessia, who had grown up in Scampia and now worked in urban development. They walked the site together, Alessia explaining the plans with obvious pride. "Community center on the ground floor," she said, pointing to the skeletal framework. "Daycare, after-school programs, job training. Second and third floors are affordable apartments. Nothing fancy, but safe and clean and actually affordable for people who live here." "How many units?" Elena asked. 40. And if this works, we're planning 3 more buildings like it in the next 2 years. They spent 2 hours touring the site, meeting workers, talking to community members who'd been involved in the planning. Elena watched Lorenzo interact with everyone, respectful, engaged, asking questions that showed he actually cared about the answers. This was a different side of him. Not the dangerous man from a criminal family, but someone genuinely trying to make a difference. On the drive back, Elena was quiet, processing. "What are you thinking?" Lorenzo asked. "That this is really impressive, and that you're serious about changing things. Did you doubt it?" "I wanted to believe it, but seeing it makes it real." Lorenzo pulled over suddenly, parking on a side street. "I need you to understand something. This project, the community center, all of it, it's not just good PR or guilt management. This is me trying to figure out who I am if I'm not just my father's son." "I know." "Do you?" "Because sometimes I'm not sure I know. I wake up some mornings and I have no idea if I'm doing this because it's right or because I'm terrified of becoming him." Elena unbuckled her seatbelt and turned to face him fully. "Can it be both?" "What?" "Can you be doing it because it's right and because you're afraid of becoming him? Do those have to be separate motivations?" Lorenzo stared at her. "I never thought of it that way." Fear of becoming something terrible can be a powerful motivator for being something good. That doesn't make the good any less real. He reached for her hand. "How are you so wise?" "I'm not wise. I'm just not carrying the weight of a legacy I didn't choose. It's easier to see clearly from the outside." "Then stay on the outside. Keep seeing clearly. Keep calling me out when I'm being stupid or self-destructive or too caught up in my own head." "I can do that." Lorenzo brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I love you. I know it's fast and probably too soon to say it, but I do. I love you." Elena's breath caught, Hearing it was different than knowing it. I love you too. And you're right. It's probably too soon and definitely too fast, but I don't care. Good. Because I need you to know that this isn't just falling anymore. I've fallen completely, and I have no idea what to do about it except tell you and hope you don't run. I'm not running. Promise? I promise. No running, even when things get hard or complicated or scary. Things are definitely going to get all three of those. I know, but we'll figure it out. They sat there for another moment, hands clasped between them, before Lorenzo finally pulled back onto the road. The rest of the drive was quiet but comfortable, filled with the kind of peace that comes from honesty and vulnerability. Back at Elena's studio, Lorenzo walked her inside and immediately noticed the new pieces she'd been working on. A collection of evening wear in deep jewel tones, each piece more ambitious than the last. "These are incredible," he said, examining a dress in emerald silk. "Are these for a show?" "I'm thinking about applying to show at Milan Fashion Week, the Emerging Designers Showcase." "You should." "It's expensive. The application fee alone is more than I make in a month, and if I get accepted, there's the cost of production, models, travel." "I'll cover it." Elena held up her hand. "No, absolutely not. We talked about this. This is different. This is an investment in your career. This is you trying to fix my problems with money." Lorenzo ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. "Why is it so hard for you to accept help? Why is it so hard for you to let me do things on my own?" They stared at each other, the first real flash of conflict since they'd admitted their feelings. Elena crossed her arms, and Lorenzo mirrored the gesture. "I'm not trying to control you," he said finally. "I know, but you're used to solving problems by throwing resources at them. I need to earn this. I need to know I got there because of my work, not because of my boyfriend's checkbook. Your work is why you'll get there. The money just removes obstacles. Those obstacles are part of the journey. Fighting through them makes the success mean something." Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. "My mother said something similar once. When my father wanted to set her up with a shop, give her everything she needed to launch her career, she refused because she wanted to build it herself. What happened? She never got the chance. Marriage and family happened instead, and she spent 40 years wondering what might have been if she'd had the opportunity. Lorenzo, I'm not saying take the money. I'm saying don't let pride or principle stop you from an opportunity you've earned. Apply. If you get in, we'll figure out the costs. Maybe you get sponsors. Maybe you take a loan. Maybe I help and you pay me back over time. But don't not apply because of money." Elena wanted to argue, but he wasn't wrong. She'd been avoiding the application for weeks because the financial reality was daunting, not because she didn't think her work was good enough. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "That's all I ask." The tension between them eased. Lorenzo pulled her into his arms, and Elena let herself relax against him. "We're going to fight sometimes," she said against his chest. "I know. And I'm not always going to agree with you. I'm counting on it. And you're going to have to learn that helping doesn't always mean fixing." Lorenzo pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I'm learning. It's just slow going." They stood there for a while, holding each other in the quiet of her studio. Outside, Naples continued its evening rhythm, and somewhere in the city, Lorenzo's world kept turning. The legitimate businesses, the complicated legacy, the slow transformation from darkness to something lighter. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Just the two of them, learning how to be together, despite all the reasons they shouldn't work. Elena pulled back slightly to look up at him. "Stay for dinner?" "I'd like that." They ordered pizza again. It was becoming their tradition, and ate sitting on the floor of her studio like they had that first day. Lorenzo told her about the next phase of the Scampia project, and Elena showed him sketches for her Milan collection. They argued about whether pineapple belonged on pizza and what counted as authentic Neapolitan style. It was normal and domestic and perfect in its imperfection. Around 10, Lorenzo's phone buzzed. He checked it, frowned, and typed a response. "Problem?" Elena asked. "Minor. One of the shipping contracts needs review before tomorrow's meeting. I should probably head home and look at it. Or you could look at it here." Lorenzo glanced up. "Are you sure? I have a couch and terrible coffee. You can work while I finish this hem." He smiled. Terrible coffee sounds perfect. They worked side by side for the next 2 hours. Lorenzo at her small desk reviewing contracts, Elena at her sewing machine finishing the emerald dress. It was companionable and easy, the kind of parallel existence that couples who'd been together for years fell into. When Lorenzo finally closed his laptop, Elena was adding the final touches to the dress. "Done?" he asked. "For tonight. You?" "For tonight." He came to stand behind her, hands on her shoulders, looking at the finished piece. "It's beautiful, really beautiful." "Thanks. It's for the collection, if I apply." "When you apply." Elena turned on her stool to face him. "You're very confident in me." "Someone has to be. You're too busy being practical and cautious. Those are usually good qualities." "They are. But sometimes you need someone to push you toward the scary things that are worth doing." Elena stood, closing the distance between them. "Is that what you're doing? Pushing me toward scary things?" "I'm the scariest thing you're doing right now." "True, but also the best." Lorenzo's arms came around her waist. "Stay with me tonight." "At my place?" Elena's heart skipped. "Is that a good idea?" "Probably not, but I don't want to leave you, and I don't want you coming all the way out to Posillipo this late just to turn around and come back in the morning." "Those are practical reasons." "Also, I want to wake up with you. That's an impractical reason." Elena smiled against his chest. "Okay." "Yeah?" "Yeah, let me grab some things." "Grab?" 20 minutes later, they were driving up into the hills, Elena's overnight bag in the back seat. The villa was quiet when they arrived, just the sound of the sea and the distant hum of the city below. Inside, Lorenzo gave her a real tour this time, not just the kitchen and dining room, but the library where he worked, the gym where he tried to burn off stress, the terrace where he went when the weight of everything got too heavy. His bedroom was on the second floor, simple and clean, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. Elena had expected something ostentatious, but it was almost austere. A large bed, minimal furniture, nothing excessive. "I spend most of my time working," Lorenzo said, reading her expression. "This is just where I sleep." "It's nice. Peaceful." He showed her the bathroom, gave her space to change, and when they finally settled into bed, it was surprisingly easy. They lay facing each other in the dark, hands clasped between them. "Thank you," Lorenzo said quietly. "For what?" "For being here. For not running when you had every reason to. For believing I can be better than what I came from." "You don't have to thank me for seeing what's already there." Lorenzo pulled her closer, and Elena rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Tomorrow would bring new complications, new challenges, new moments where they'd have to choose each other over easier paths. But tonight, they had this. The quiet intimacy of two people learning to trust each other with their whole selves. Elena fell asleep to the sound of Lorenzo's breathing and the distant crash of waves against rocks, feeling safer than she had in months. When she woke in the morning, sunlight was streaming through the windows, and Lorenzo was already up, standing on the terrace with his phone. She watched him for a moment, the tension in his shoulders, the way he ran his hand through his hair, the careful control in his voice, even when discussing something that clearly frustrated him. This was her life now. This complicated, dangerous, extraordinary man and all the weight he carried. Elena got out of bed and wrapped herself in one of his shirts before joining him on the terrace. Lorenzo ended the call when he saw her, a smile replacing the tension on his face. "Morning. Everything okay?" "Just business, nothing urgent." He pulled her into his arms. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in weeks." "Good. I was worried my bed might be too firm, or the light might wake you, or—" Elena kissed him to stop the spiral of worry. "It was perfect. You're allowed to stop finding things to fix." "That's going to be hard for me." "I know, but try." They had breakfast on the terrace, coffee and pastries and fresh fruit, while Naples woke up below them. It felt like a small pocket of peace carved out of the chaos, and Elena found herself wanting more mornings exactly like this. "I need to tell you something," Lorenzo said, setting down his coffee. Elena's stomach tightened. "Okay. I want this to be real, not just dating or seeing where it goes. Actually real. You and me, committed, figuring out how to build a life together despite all the complications." "Lorenzo, I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a few months, but I also know what I feel, and I'm tired of being careful about it. I love you. I want a future with you, and I need to know if you want that too. Elena's hands shook slightly as she set down her own coffee. What does a future look like in your world? Whatever we make it, it doesn't have to be traditional or follow anyone else's timeline. It just has to be us, choosing each other. Even when that choice is hard, especially when it's hard. Elena looked out at the view, the city where she'd fought for 3 years to build her dreams, the sea that stretched to horizons she'd never explored, the life that was unfolding in ways she'd never imagined. Yes, she said, I want that too. Lorenzo's expression shifted into something Elena had never seen before, pure, unguarded joy. He stood, pulling her up with him, and kissed her like she was the answer to every question he'd ever had. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Lorenzo kept his forehead pressed to hers. I have something for you, he said, but I need you to understand it's not a proposal. Not yet, it's a promise. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Not the ring box Elena had half expected, but something flatter. Inside was a key on a simple silver chain. It's to the villa, Lorenzo said, so you can come and go as you want. So you always have a place here, with me. Elena's throat went tight. Lorenzo, you don't have to use it. You don't have to move in or change anything about your life. I just want you to know you belong here, that this is yours as much as mine. She took the key, the weight of it feeling like so much more than metal. This is real for you. This is the most real thing in my life. Elena put the chain around her neck, the key settling just above her heart. Then it's real for me too. They stood there on the terrace, holding each other while the city woke around them, and Elena felt the last of her careful walls crumbling. This was it. The moment she stopped protecting herself from the possibility of pain and started reaching for the possibility of everything. It was terrifying and exhilarating and absolutely right. Whatever came next, the challenges, the conflicts, the complications of Lorenzo's world, they'd face it together. Not perfectly, not without fear, but with the kind of fierce commitment that came from choosing love despite every reason to run. Elena had told a mafia boss he couldn't have a parking space. Now she was giving him her heart. And somehow, impossibly, it was the bravest and best decision she'd ever made. The next 3 months unfolded with a rhythm that surprised them both. Elena divided her time between the studio and Lorenzo's villa, the key around her neck becoming as familiar as her own heartbeat. They fought occasionally. About money, about boundaries. About Lorenzo's tendency to solve problems before Elena even knew they existed. But they also learned each other's patterns, the small tells that meant stress or fear, or the kind of vulnerability neither of them was good at showing. Elena submitted her application to Milan Fashion Week in early December. She used her own money, took out a small loan, and refused Lorenzo's repeated offers to help with anything beyond moral support. When the acceptance email arrived 3 weeks later, she called him from the studio, crying too hard to speak coherently. I got in, she finally managed. Lorenzo, I got in. He showed up 20 minutes later with champagne and that smile that still made her stomach flip. They celebrated on the floor of her studio, surrounded by the collection she'd poured herself into, and Elena felt like maybe all the struggling and rejection and doubt had been leading to this moment. But success brought its own complications. The production costs for the show were staggering. Elena had budgeted conservatively, but fabric alone was eating through her savings faster than she'd anticipated. Models, hair and makeup, transportation to Milan, it all added up to an amount that made her nauseous. Let me help, Lorenzo said for the 100th time, watching her calculate numbers at her work table. No. Elena, I said no. I'm figuring it out. By not sleeping? By taking on extra commissions you don't have time for? You're going to burn out before you even get to Milan. Elena threw down her pencil. What do you want me to say? That I can't do this without your money? That I need you to save me? I want you to admit that accepting help doesn't make you weak. It makes you smart. It makes me dependent. On what? On someone who loves you and wants to see you succeed? That's not dependency, Elena. That's partnership. She stood, pacing to the window. Outside, winter rain was turning Naples gray and cold. You don't understand. My whole life I've had to do everything myself. My parents couldn't help. My friends couldn't help. Nobody could help. So I learned not to need it. And now you're asking me to unlearn that, and I don't know if I can. Lorenzo came to stand behind her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his warmth. I'm not asking you to need me. I'm asking you to let me be part of this, to let me share in something that matters to you. Well, why does it matter so much to you? Because watching you create is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Because your success is something I can be part of without it being tainted by my family's legacy. Because I love you and I want to help, and you won't let me help with anything else, so let me help with this. Elena turned to face him. If I let you help, I need conditions. Okay? It's a loan, with a payment plan. I pay you back every cent within 2 years. Elena, those are my terms. Take them or leave them. Lorenzo studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. Deal. But I get to come to Milan and watch you succeed. That wasn't part of the negotiation. I'm adding it now. Despite everything, Elena smiled. Fine. You can come to Milan. They drew up a contract that night. Lorenzo insisted, saying if they were doing this formally, they should do it properly. Elena signed her name at the bottom and felt something shift. Not dependence, but the slow, terrifying process of learning to trust someone with her dreams. The weeks leading up to Milan were chaos. Elena worked 18-hour days finishing the collection, making adjustments, obsessing over details that probably no one else would notice. Lorenzo helped where she'd let him, picking up supplies, bringing her food when she forgot to eat, sitting quietly in the studio while she worked so she wasn't alone. Juliana came by twice a week, offering technical advice and the kind of steady presence that kept Elena from spiraling completely. Sophia visited too, bringing coffee and gossip from the university, reminding Elena that there was a world beyond fabric and seams and the terror of putting her work in front of critics. 3 days before they were scheduled to leave for Milan, Lorenzo came to the studio looking grim. What's wrong? Elena asked immediately. Nothing's wrong, but I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it. Elena set down the dress she'd been steaming. Okay. There's been some interest in your work, from buyers. They've been calling my office asking about you. Why would they call your office? Because people know we're together, and they assume I have influence over your decisions, which I don't, he added quickly. But they're calling anyway. Elena's stomach dropped. Who? 3 boutiques in Rome, a department store buyer from Florence, and a fashion house in Milan that wants to discuss a potential licensing deal. This is because of you, because of your connections and your name. Partly, but also because your work is good, Elena. These people wouldn't waste their time if you weren't talented. Elena walked away from him, hands shaking. I can't do this. Do what? Wonder if every opportunity is real or if it's just people trying to get close to you. Second guess every success. Question whether I earned it. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. So what are you saying? You want me to tell them to back off? Pretend we're not together? Hide our relationship so you can feel like you did it all alone? Maybe. That's bullshit, and you know it. Elena spun to face him. Don't tell me what I know. Then stop acting like loving me means your accomplishments don't count. You designed this collection. You poured yourself into every piece. You got into Milan on your own merit. The fact that some buyers heard about you through my network doesn't change any of that. It taints it. Only if you let it. Lorenzo crossed the space between them. You want to know what my father taught me? That power means nothing if you don't use it. That connections are worthless if you hoard them. I have access to people and resources most designers never get near. Why is it wrong for you to benefit from that? Because I didn't earn it. You earned me. You fought for this relationship every step of the way. You chose to be with me despite all the complications and danger and baggage. So yeah, maybe some doors open because of my name, but you're the one who has to walk through them and prove you belong there. Elena wanted to argue, but the fight was draining out of her. I hate that you're making sense. I hate that you're so stubborn about accepting good things. They stood there, both frustrated and tired, and trying to figure out how to navigate this new complication. Finally, Elena sighed. What do you think I should do? Take the meetings. Listen to the offers. Then decide based on what's best for your career, not what makes you feel like you earned it the hard way. That's reasonable. I have my moments. Elena moved into his arms, letting him hold her while she processed. I'm sorry. for making this harder than it needs to be. You're protecting yourself. I get it, but eventually you're going to have to trust that good things can happen without it being a trap. I'm working on it. I know, so am I. They flew to Milan on a Thursday morning, Elena's collection carefully packed and her nerves frayed to nothing. Lorenzo had booked them a hotel near the venue. Nothing ostentatious, just a clean room with a view of the city. Elena spent the evening doing final checks while Lorenzo answered emails and pretended he wasn't watching her with concern. The night before the show, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Lorenzo breathed evenly beside her. "I can hear you thinking," he said without opening his eyes. "I thought you were asleep." "I was trying. Your anxiety is loud." He rolled toward her. "Talk to me." "What if it's terrible? What if everyone hates it? What if I get up there and realize I'm not good enough?" "Then you learn from it and do better next time. But that's not going to happen because your work is exceptional. You have to say that. You're sleeping with me." "I'd say it even if I wasn't. I said it before we were together, remember? At your studio, the first time I saw your designs." Elena turned to face him. "What if this is the peak? What if I never do anything better than this collection?" "Then you'll have peaked higher than most people ever dream of reaching. But also, you're 26. You have decades to keep creating and growing." "I'm scared." "I know, be scared, but do it anyway." She kissed him, grateful and terrified and trying to believe him. Lorenzo pulled her close, and they lay tangled together until Elena finally drifted into restless sleep. The show was at 3 in the afternoon. Elena arrived at the venue at 7 in the morning, checked her pieces for the 100th time, and tried not to throw up from nerves. The other designers were a mix of confident and panicked, everyone dealing with the pressure in their own way. Lorenzo showed up at noon with coffee and a calm presence that helped more than Elena wanted to admit. He didn't try to fix anything or offer advice. He just stayed close, a steady anchor in the chaos. At 2:30, Juliana and Sofia arrived, both dressed beautifully and carrying the kind of energy that cut through Elena's spiral of anxiety. "You look like you're going to faint," Sofia said. "Breathe." "I'm breathing." "Deeper breaths. You're hyperventilating." Juliana took Elena's hands. "Listen to me. You've done the work. The pieces are perfect. Now you let them speak for themselves." "What if nobody listens?" "Then they're fools. But they will listen, because your work demands it." The show started at 3:15. Elena stood backstage, watching through a gap in the curtain as models from other designers walked. The audience was full: critics, buyers, fashion journalists, all the people whose opinions could make or break a career. Then it was her turn. The first model walked out in the emerald dress Elena had finished that night at Juliana's house. The second wore the burgundy piece she'd made for the gallery opening. One by one, her collection moved down the runway, and Elena forgot to breathe. It was different seeing her work on models, in motion, under the lights. The pieces she'd obsessed over for months suddenly looked alive, powerful, exactly what she'd imagined when she'd first sketched them. The audience response was muted. Fashion shows were always subdued, criticism coming later in reviews and orders. But Elena caught glimpses of people leaning forward, taking notes, exchanging glances that looked almost impressed. When the last model finished and Elena was supposed to come out for her bow, her legs wouldn't move. Lorenzo appeared at her elbow. "Go." "I can't." "You can." "I'll be right here when you get back." Elena forced herself to walk onto the runway. The applause was polite, professional, and she managed a small bow before escaping back behind the curtain where Lorenzo was waiting. "You did it," he said, pulling her into his arms. "I did it," Elena repeated, not quite believing it. The rest of the afternoon was a blur. Buyers approaching with cards and questions, critics asking about her inspiration and techniques, other designers congratulating her with varying degrees of sincerity. Elena answered questions on autopilot, smile plastered on, trying to process that it was over and she'd survived. By 7, she was exhausted and starving and desperately needing quiet. Lorenzo extracted her from the venue and took her back to the hotel, where he ordered room service and let her collapse on the bed. "How do you feel?" he asked, handing her wine. "Numb. Overwhelmed. Like maybe I didn't completely humiliate myself." "You were brilliant." "You're biased." "Extremely, but also right." He pulled out his phone. You have 14 messages from buyers who want to meet tomorrow, 3 interview requests, and 1 very enthusiastic email from the fashion house I mentioned. Elena sat up. What does it say? Lorenzo handed her the phone. Elena read the email twice, her hands shaking. They wanted to discuss a collaboration, a full collection under her name, backed by their resources and distribution network. It was the kind of opportunity designers spent careers hoping for. This can't be real, she said. It's real. They probably sent it because of you. They sent it because 50 people watched your show this afternoon and realized you're the real thing. Lorenzo took the phone back. You can meet with them or not, your choice. But don't dismiss it just because it feels too good to be true. Elena flopped back on the bed. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Success. I know how to struggle and fight and push through obstacles. I don't know how to handle things actually working out. Lorenzo lay down beside her. You learn, same way you learned everything else. What if I mess it up? Then you mess it up and figure out how to fix it, but you won't because you're smart and talented and more capable than you give yourself credit for. Elena rolled toward him. When did you become the optimistic one? When I fell in love with someone who sees the best in me despite all evidence to the contrary, it's contagious. She kissed him, soft and grateful and full of emotions she didn't have words for. When they finally broke apart, Lorenzo was smiling. I'm proud of you, he said quietly, in case I haven't said it enough. You've said it plenty. Then I'll say it again. I'm proud of you, Elena Russo, for fighting for your dreams, for not giving up even when it was hard, for letting me be part of this. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you for believing in me, for pushing me when I needed it and backing off when I asked, for being here. Nowhere else I'd rather be. They spent the rest of the evening in bed, eating room service and watching terrible Italian TV and pretending the outside world didn't exist. It was perfect in its simplicity. Just 2 people who loved each other, celebrating a victory they'd both earned in different ways. The next morning brought meetings. Elena talked to buyers, negotiated with boutiques, and sat down with the representatives from the fashion house. They offered her everything: funding for a full collection, production support, distribution to high-end retailers across Europe. All she had to do was sign. What do you think? Elena asked Lorenzo over lunch. I think it's an incredible opportunity, but it's also a big commitment. You'd be partnering with a major house, which means some loss of creative control. They said I'd have full design authority. They say that now, but companies like this have expectations, target demographics, profit margins to hit. It might not be as free as you hope. Elena pushed food around her plate. So you think I shouldn't do it? I think you should do whatever feels right for you. If you want the backing of a major house, take it. If you want to build your own label independently, do that. There's no wrong answer. That's not helpful. I'm trying not to influence your decision. Since when? Lorenzo smiled. Since I realized you resent it when I do. Elena reached across the table for his hand. I need your opinion. Your real opinion. My real opinion is that you're capable of building something extraordinary on your own. You don't need their resources or their name, but you could use them to get where you're going faster, and there's nothing wrong with that either. So basically, you're saying I should trust my gut. Basically, yes. Elena sat back, thinking. The safe choice was the fashion house. Guaranteed funding, established distribution, a clear path forward. The risky choice was staying independent, maintaining complete control, but facing all the financial uncertainty that came with it. She thought about the last 3 years. The rejections and struggles and nights she'd wanted to quit. She'd survived all of it by being smart and stubborn and willing to fight for what mattered. This was what mattered. I'm turning them down, she said. Lorenzo's eyebrows rose. Yeah? Yeah, I want to build this myself, my label, my terms, my timeline. It'll be harder and slower, but it'll be mine. You're sure? I'm terrified, but yes, I'm sure. Lorenzo squeezed her hand. Then I'll support you, whatever you need. Even if I fail? You won't fail. But even if you do, I'll be here. Elena felt something settle in her chest, not certainty, but confidence in her ability to handle whatever came next. She'd chosen the hard path, but it was her path, and that made all the difference. They flew back to Naples the next day, Elena's head full of plans and possibilities. The orders from boutiques would keep her busy for months, and she had ideas for expanding the studio, hiring an assistant, building slowly and sustainably. Lorenzo supported it all without trying to take over, offering advice when she asked and stepping back when she didn't. They were learning the rhythm of partnership, the give and take of supporting each other without losing themselves. 2 months after Milan, on a Sunday evening at Giuliana's house for dinner, Lorenzo pulled Elena aside. "Walk with me," he said. They went out to the garden, where early spring was starting to show in green shoots and flowering trees. Naples spread below them, chaotic and beautiful and home. "I need to tell you something," Lorenzo said. Elena's heart skipped. "Okay." "The legitimizing, the transformation of my father's business. It's working. We've divested from everything questionable, brought in outside auditors, started partnerships with regulatory agencies. As of last week, every DeLuca enterprise is completely legal." Elena stared at him. "Lorenzo, that's incredible." "It took 3 years and more money than I want to think about. But it's done. I'm done carrying that weight." "How do you feel?" "Lighter, scared. Like I don't know who I am if I'm not fighting to be better than my father." Elena took his hands. "You're Lorenzo. You're the man who fought for what was right even when it was hard, who built community centers and affordable housing, who learned to cook ossobuco and argue about pizza toppings. That's who you are." "And who are you?" "I'm Elena. The woman who told a mafia boss he couldn't have a parking space and somehow ended up falling in love with him." Lorenzo smiled. "That was pretty stupid of you. Terrible decision-making on my part. Want to make another terrible decision with me?" Elena's breath caught. "What kind of decision?" Lorenzo reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Not the key from months ago, but an actual ring box. Elena's heart started hammering. "I know it's fast," Lorenzo said. "I know we've only been together for 8 months, but I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to watch you build your empire and argue with you about accepting help and wake up next to you for the next 50 years. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, a single stone that caught the light. "Marry me, Elena. Not because it makes sense or because it's the practical thing. Marry me because you love me and I love you, and we're better together than apart." Elena's vision blurred with tears. "We're going to fight. Constantly. And I'm going to be stubborn about accepting help." "I know. And your world is always going to be complicated." "Probably. And I'm terrified that I'll wake up one day and realize I made a mistake." Lorenzo's expression shifted into something vulnerable. "Is that a no?" "That's a yes, you idiot. I'm terrified and it's too fast and completely insane, but yes. I'll marry you." Lorenzo's whole face transformed. He pulled her into his arms, lifting her off the ground, and when he set her down to kiss her, Elena felt like she was flying. The ring fit perfectly. Of course it did. Lorenzo had probably measured her finger while she slept or asked Giuliana or done something equally calculating and sweet. They went back inside to tell his family, and Giuliana cried while Sophia whooped and pulled out a bottle of expensive champagne she claimed she'd been saving for exactly this occasion. "I knew it," Sophia said, hugging Elena. "From the parking space story, I knew you two were going to end up together." "That's revisionist history," Lorenzo protested. "It's sister intuition, much more reliable than your actual planning." They celebrated late into the night, and when Lorenzo finally drove Elena home, she couldn't stop looking at the ring on her finger. "What are you thinking?" Lorenzo asked. "That this is crazy. That we barely know each other. That I'm supposed to be practical and careful, and this is neither of those things." "Having regrets already?" "No, that's the crazy part. I'm not. I should be, but I'm not." Lorenzo pulled up outside her building and turned to face her. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think sometimes the best decisions are the ones that don't make logical sense. The ones you make with your heart instead of your head." "That's not very DeLuca of you." "You're turning me soft." Elena kissed him. "Good. You needed softening." They set a date for 6 months out, long enough to plan properly, short enough that they didn't lose momentum. Elena threw herself into wedding planning with the same intensity she brought to everything, driving Lorenzo and both their families slightly crazy with details and contingencies. The studio flourished. Elena hired an assistant, a recent graduate named Marta, who had talent and hustle, and reminded Elena of herself at that age. Orders kept coming, and Elena was finally making enough money to pay Lorenzo back ahead of schedule. "You don't have to do this so fast," Lorenzo said when she handed him the third payment. "Yes, I do. We agreed on 2 years. I'm aiming for 18 months. "Elena, don't. This matters to me. Let me do it." He didn't argue. He was learning when to push and when to let her have her victories on her own terms. 3 months before the wedding, Elena got a call from a journalist at a major fashion magazine. They wanted to do a feature on emerging designers, and Elena's name had come up repeatedly in their research. The interview was scheduled for a Wednesday afternoon at the studio. Elena prepared obsessively, cleaning the space and organizing her samples and trying to anticipate questions. The journalist was a woman in her 40s named Carlotta, sharp-eyed and observant. She asked good questions about Elena's process and inspiration, her journey from struggling designer to Milan success story. Then she asked about Lorenzo. "Your fiancé is Lorenzo De Luca, from the De Luca family. How has that connection influenced your career?" Elena had known this question was coming, but it still made her stomach clench. "It hasn't. My work speaks for itself." "But surely his connections have opened doors." "Some doors, yes. But I'm the one who has to walk through them and prove I belong. The connection might get you a meeting. The work is what gets you the commission. There are people who say you're only successful because of your relationship. There are always people who say that about women who succeed, especially when they're with powerful men. It doesn't make it true." Carlotta smiled slightly. "That's a good answer. It's an honest answer." The interview continued, and when it was over, Elena felt wrung out but satisfied. She'd said what needed saying without being defensive or apologetic. The article came out 2 weeks later. It was fair, highlighting Elena's talent while acknowledging the complications of her relationship with Lorenzo. The comment section was brutal, people questioning her merit, calling her a gold digger, suggesting she'd slept her way to success. Elena made the mistake of reading them. Lorenzo found her at the studio that evening, staring at her laptop with tears streaming down her face. "Talk to me," he said, pulling up a chair. "They think I'm a fraud, that everything I've accomplished is because of you." "Some people think that. Most people don't." "How do you know?" "Because you have orders backed up for months. Because buyers keep calling. Because your work is in boutiques across Italy. That doesn't happen because of connections. That happens because you're talented." "What if they're right? What if I only got here because of you?" Lorenzo turned her chair to face him. "Listen to me. I've been in business my whole life. I know the difference between someone with talent and someone just riding connections. You have real talent, Elena, the kind that would have gotten you here eventually, with or without me. Maybe it would have taken longer. Maybe the path would have been harder. But you would have made it." "You can't know that." "Yes, I can. Because I've seen you work. I've seen you fight for every commission and pour yourself into every piece. That's not luck or connections. That's you being exceptional." Elena leaned into him, letting him hold her while she cried out the frustration and doubt. When she finally pulled back, Lorenzo wiped her tears with his thumbs. "You want to know what I learned from my father?" he asked. "What?" "That people will always find reasons to diminish your success. If you're connected, they say you didn't earn it. If you're self-made, they say you're lucky. If you're a woman, they say you slept your way there. The criticism never stops. So you might as well do what makes you happy and let them talk." That's surprisingly wise. "I have my moments." Elena closed her laptop. "I'm not reading comments anymore." "Good plan. And I'm going to keep working and proving them wrong." "Even better plan." They went to dinner at Ninella's that night, their place where it had all started. Franco recognized them immediately, his weathered face breaking into a smile. "The designer and the boss, we haven't seen you two in months." "We've been busy," Lorenzo said, shaking his hand. "Too busy for good food? That's no way to live." They ordered their usual, and while they waited, Elena looked around the crowded restaurant. Nothing had changed. Same cramped tables, same chaotic energy, same feeling of being part of something larger than themselves. "What are you thinking?" Lorenzo asked. that I'm glad we came back here, that some things should stay the same even when everything else is changing. Agreed. Their food arrived, and they ate and talked and reminded themselves why they'd fallen in love in the first place. Not because of power or connections or what they could do for each other, but because they made each other laugh and challenged each other and felt more like themselves together than apart. The wedding happened on a Saturday in June. They'd chosen a small venue in Posillipo with views of the sea, intimate enough for just family and close friends. Elena wore a dress she'd designed herself, simple ivory silk with careful construction that Juliana had helped her perfect. Lorenzo cried when he saw her walking down the aisle. Not subtle tears, but actual crying, the kind that made Sophia laugh and Juliana cry harder. Elena's own eyes were wet by the time she reached him. "You're beautiful," he whispered. "You're biased." Extremely, but also right. The ceremony was short and sweet, focused on promises they both meant. To support each other. To be honest even when it was hard. To choose each other every day despite all the reasons it might be easier not to. When the officiant pronounced them married, Lorenzo kissed her like he'd been waiting his whole life for permission. The small crowd erupted in applause, and Elena felt something settle deep in her chest. This was her life now. This complicated, beautiful, imperfect life with a man who'd fought his way out of darkness to find light. The reception was loud and joyful, full of dancing and toasts and the kind of celebration that comes from people who genuinely care about each other. Juliana gave a speech about Elena reminding her of herself at that age, and Sophia told embarrassing stories about Lorenzo that made everyone laugh. When it was Lorenzo's turn to speak, he pulled Elena close and addressed the room. "Most of you know how we met. We fought over a parking space, and Elena told me no, and that word, that simple word, changed my life. Because it made me realize I wanted to be around someone who saw me as just a person, not a name or a legacy or something to be afraid of. Elena saw me, the real me. And she chose me anyway, which is either the bravest or stupidest decision she's ever made." "Definitely stupidest," Elena interjected, and everyone laughed. "Probably," Lorenzo agreed, "but I'm grateful for it every single day. For her stubbornness and her talent and her willingness to call me out when I'm being an idiot. I don't know what I did to deserve her, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that choice." He raised his glass. "To Elena, to partnership, to building something beautiful out of unexpected beginnings." Everyone drank, and Elena felt tears streaming down her face again. Lorenzo wiped them away, smiling. "Happy tears?" he asked. "The happiest." They danced until late, Elena's feet aching in her beautiful shoes and her face hurting from smiling. When they finally left for their honeymoon in the early hours of morning, the sky was just starting to lighten over the bay. They'd chosen Greece, a quiet island where nobody knew them and they could just be two people in love. They spent 2 weeks swimming and eating and making love and talking about the future they were building together. Elena told Lorenzo about her dreams of opening a flagship store, maybe in Milan or Paris. Lorenzo told her about the foundation he wanted to start, funding education and job training in Naples' poorest neighborhoods. They made plans and argued about details and fell even more in love with the versions of themselves they were becoming. On their last night, they sat on the beach watching the sunset, Elena's head on Lorenzo's shoulder. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "Your father's empire, the power." "Sometimes," Lorenzo admitted, "the certainty of it, the clear roles. But then I think about who I was becoming when I had all that power, and I don't miss it at all." "Who were you becoming?" "Someone hard. Someone who solved problems with threats instead of conversation. Someone my mother was afraid of, even though she never said it." "And now?" "Now I'm someone trying to build instead of destroy. Someone who believes good things are possible. Someone who got incredibly lucky over a parking space dispute." Elena laughed. "That is pretty lucky." "The luckiest." They flew back to Naples at the end of June, tanned and rested and ready to face whatever came next. Elena dove back into work with renewed energy, and Lorenzo launched his foundation with the kind of quiet determination that was getting real results. The first year of marriage was an adjustment. They fought about dishes and schedules and whose turn it was to deal with various family dramas. But they also learned each other's rhythms, the small compromises that made living together work, the ways to support each other through stress and doubt. Elena's business grew steadily. She opened a small showroom in the Chiaya district, hired 2 more assistants, and started doing custom bridal wear. Every success felt earned, built on her own merit and hard work, with Lorenzo supporting from the sidelines in ways that empowered rather than overshadowed. Lorenzo's foundation funded 3 new community centers in its first year, providing resources to thousands of families. He was building the legacy he'd always wanted, one based on helping rather than hurting, creating rather than controlling. On their first anniversary, Lorenzo took Elena back to the spot where they'd fought over the parking space. It was early evening, the same time of day they'd first met, and the street looked exactly the same. "This is where it all started," Elena said, looking at the unremarkable stretch of pavement. "Worst parking job I've ever seen," Lorenzo said. "You were blocking the entire street. You were over the line." They grinned at each other, the old argument familiar and comfortable now. "I'm glad you didn't back down," Lorenzo said seriously. "I'm glad you were stubborn enough to track me down. Want to know a secret?" "Always." "I knew your name before I picked up your business card. I'd seen it fall, read it, and decided right then I was going to find you. The card was just an excuse." Elena's mouth fell open. "You stalker? Determined romantic. That's the same thing." "Is it though?" She shoved him playfully, and Lorenzo caught her hands, pulling her close. "I love you, Elena DeLuca." "I love you too, even though you're a controlling, stubborn, manipulative." He kissed her to stop the list, and Elena melted into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she smiled against his mouth. "Happy anniversary." "Happy anniversary." They drove to dinner at a new restaurant Lorenzo had found, and over wine and good food, they talked about the next year. Elena wanted to show at Paris Fashion Week. Lorenzo wanted to expand the foundation to other cities. They made plans and dreamed together, building a future that honored both their ambitions. Life wasn't perfect. They still fought, still struggled with balancing work and relationship, still had moments where they had to choose each other over easier paths. But they showed up for it anyway, day after day, because what they'd built together was worth the effort. Elena learned to accept help without feeling weak. Lorenzo learned that supporting someone didn't mean solving all their problems. They both learned that love wasn't about being perfect or having all the answers. It was about showing up honestly, fighting for what mattered, and choosing each other even when it was hard. 2 years after the wedding, Elena's collection showed in Paris to critical acclaim. 3 years in, Lorenzo's foundation was operating in 5 cities. 4 years in, they bought a house together. Not the villa in the hills, but a place in the city where they could build their own memories instead of living in his family's shadow. Through it all, they kept coming back to Nanella's for dinner, to the parking space where it started, to the reminder that sometimes the smallest moments lead to the biggest changes. Because Elena had told a mafia boss he couldn't have what he wanted, and in doing so, had given them both something neither knew they needed. Not just love, but partnership. Not just passion, but genuine respect. Not just the excitement of danger, but the steady comfort of someone who saw all of you and chose to stay anyway. They'd built something extraordinary out of a parking space argument, a life neither of them could have imagined, but both of them fought to keep. And every day, they chose it again. Chose each other. Chose to believe that broken people could build beautiful things if they were willing to do the work. It wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. And that, Elena thought, every time Lorenzo kissed her goodnight, or made her laugh, or challenged her to be better than she thought she could be, was everything. Sometimes the boldest risks really did lead to everything. Sometimes fighting for 5 minutes over asphalt and pride really could ignite the greatest destiny. Sometimes you just had to be brave enough or stupid enough to tell someone no and mean it. Elena had been both, and she'd do it all over again in a heartbeat.